I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Generally, you said feminism is
neutral. Here's what actually happened.
This the foundation of all
money. I'm really mad that
what difference does it make, right? What
Stop. Stop.
the deregulation of the industry is obviously going to cause more of that industry.
And to lubricate the trust connection between people until they have enough.
Yet we could still look at biological reality in determining who's a female, even if there are.
Why don't you denounce feminism the same way you're denouncing capitalism? If you don't...
For something to be objective, it needs to be verifiable. And you can't verify...
If I make a claim as a political pundit, it is true that I definitely could be wrong. That you're promoting, right?
Ideology is the main method of politics, right? This is my ideology. So 2015, anyone go back and watch the footage? The first GOP debate.
Robert, that? With a crowbar, you say?
Good evening, Mater Nation. I am Sarah, the Raging Tomato, here bringing to you live another Moderator Monday. This evening, I have with me Speakeasy, Fabian Liberty, Broad Street Bully, and Lawyer Chick, of course, all here to duke out the question, should we abolish jury trials? Speakeasy, if you'd like to begin with your opening statement, please.
All right. Thank you, Sarah, for hosting this, and my opponent and partner for showing up. Let's just hop right into this. Let's be honest. The idea that 12 random retards off the street, a mechanic, a barista, a retiree, and some teenager who doesn't even want to be there should decide whether someone goes to prison or not. It sounds noble on paper, but in practice, this is chaos in a robe. All right, we cling to juries like an old family heirloom. Right? It's cracked, it's outdated, and it's useless for the fucking world we live in. Justice isn't supposed to be about who cries better or who looks more sympathetic. Justice is supposed to be objective. And yet juries are emotion factories. The jury system is institutionally biased. It mirrors society's inequalities. The wealthy, the educated, the dominant race, they're overrepresented. Marginalized communities are systematically underrepresented. You call this democracy, and I call this prejudice codified into procedure. Look at cases like Flowers versus Mississippi. Prosecutors struck nearly all black jurors, and this wasn't a mistake. It was structural. It was baked into the system. And even without overt racism, bias lurks everywhere in it. Jurors decide based on stereotypes and gut feelings, not evidence. The result is inconsistent verdicts, wrongful convictions, mistrials. Take the West Memphis 3, right? Social hysteria and moral panic is what dictated this jury's decision, not facts. And this happens constantly, right? It's a lottery of bias disguised as justice. And then we can talk about the cost. Jury trials are expensive and slow. Selection, mistrials, retrials, millions wasted, cases delayed for months, sometimes even years. Edward Hawley's retrial for the murder of Megan McDonald was delayed months because of jury complications. This is chaos. Now imagine instead a panel of judges, right? Professionals, trained, accountable, transparent, and they follow the law. They leave written reasoning behind and they're watching each other so no single bias can dominate. Corruption can be punished, errors can be corrected. All right. And yes, the other side here is probably going to cry it's unconstitutional. And you know what else used to be constitutional? Child labor and slavery. All right. The Constitution is a framework meant to evolve to ensure justice. The Sixth Amendment guarantees a fair trial, not a roulette wheel of 12 random morons. Modern crime isn't pickpocketing horses anymore. DNA, digital forensics, and billion-dollar frauds. Do you really want 12 strangers? You want to trust 12 strangers with this? No. You hire a surgeon for surgery. So why would you gamble with human lives when it comes to the law? And they may talk about reform, right? That's like putting lipstick on a corpse. You can't train empathy, you can't erase bias, and you can't force competence. The system is just structurally flawed. The jury is a relic and a coin flip with a consequence, right? So ask yourself this: do you trust the life of a human being with 12 random retards, or do you trust justice itself? Trained, accountable, and unflinching justice. The answer is obvious. The jury is dead, and it's time to bury it.
Perfect. Thank you. Speak easy. Fabian Liberty, to you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we were alternating. My bad. Well, thank you for hosting. Appreciate coming back. It's should be great. So let me get into it. Tonight, my partner and I have the challenge of convincing an audience of Americans to dispense with something held sacrosanct. And it is my sincerest hope that, unlike juries, you will all listen to reason and rational arguments. The right to trial by a jury is an impractical contradiction of institutional bias, subjecting the accused to the whims of the irrational, and ought to be abolished. Juries, they're formed from normies. Juries are your neighbors, the lady double masking at Walmart, your local doctor, or a car salesman. In theory, this allows the common man to rationally judge the accused, free of the state's desire to seek conviction. In practice, it is a shit show of incompetence and irrationality. The average American struggles with critical and probabilistic thinking, crucial for trials. Research shows only about 20% of people are capable of applying critical thinking skills from trained concepts to novel concepts, and instead revert to basic intuitive thinking. Or 8 out of 12 jurors are just going to vibe out your case, even if taught how to examine evidence or the laws in question. Studies have consistently shown that racial in-group preference, emotional testimonies, and empathy substantially affect outcomes in mock trials. Emotional and vivid testimony is weighted by jurors as more relevant. They suffer from availability bias on later testimony and media examples. And of course, this is all assuming the juries are sequestered from media without phones or Google, something nearly impossible for high-profile cases. This very fact should show you just how much juries are susceptible to propaganda and rhetoric. Secondly, it's important to point out that the right to trial by jury is not a right, but a violation of your rights. Jury duty is a mandatory service, but more importantly, many capital, federal, civil upon request, and consumer protection cases force juries onto the accused or one party, regardless of their desires. When anyone claims that in America we have a right to trial by jury, they are lying to your face. What they really mean is that juries are a form of institutional bias imposed upon people by the state. Nevertheless, our founding fathers argued vociferously for the right to a trial by jury. Madison and Hamilton especially argued that juries were a, quote, valuable safeguard to liberty. So where did they go wrong? In Federalist number 83, Madison rebukes the fear of anti-federalists in civil cases by stating in no uncertain terms that there are several issues with juries. Quote, I am not prepared to deny that there may be cases in which this mode of trial would be proper, but I am persuaded that it cannot be proper in all cases. Even at a time when the laws and regulations of the state were undeniably minuscule compared to today, Madison recognized that juries lacked sufficient expertise to try complex cases. Instead, the founding fathers viewed juries not as superior at enacting justice through evidence, but biased against the state and a check against judicial tyranny. This belief depended on a rational jury of 12 men that were aware and capable and duty-bound to judge the morality of the law in question. Today, juror annulment is regularly screened out during voir dire. This is in stark contrast to the beliefs of our founding fathers, such as First Chief Justice John Jay, who explicitly informed juries of their right to juror annulment. The entire process of juries as a check on state tyranny has always been contradictory. The state imposes the controls on juries as well as the process, and the people that are intended to check the state. This was a temporal solution that depended on a revolutionary spirit in young men and a state that would expand wouldn't expand despite its tendency to do so. Today is an institutional bias slot machine that does not favor objective justice. Juries ought be supplanted by professional jurors, a panel of judges, or some other such solution until the state recognizes voluntary systems of justice. Given this, I propose a simple question to our opponents. How is a jury trial imposed upon someone against their will superior at either achieving justice or stopping state tyranny?
Perfect. Thank you, Fabian. Broad Street Bully, to you, please.
There are some things that theoretically work. In theory, we are all bringing our experiences, our knowledge to the table in order to decide these rather important questions. Everyone is supposed to be able to bring a certain level of talent to solve a problem, to bring forth a particular result. Because of that unique difference, you are inherently going to have imperfection. We strive for perfection in jury trials. And yes, while our system is not perfect, it is the best system we have. Because as we know through our history, that the founding fathers feared one thing above all else. They feared tyrannical government. The ultimate fail-safe to that tyrannical government was an informed and a participating public in the justice system. If you look at how things were done back in ye old English days, it was the king and or his magistrates that decided whether or not who would have their day in court. After the Magna Carta, we decided to move towards a system where the people would be able to decide and make decisions so that we could essentially move further away from tyranny. And in the United States, when we adopted that English system, we came to an understanding that we wanted to make sure that the executory branches and also the judiciary didn't have too much power. So we wanted to make sure that citizens were informed. Now, again, is it perfect? No. But the fact of the matter is that as our criminal justice system has grown and become more revenue-based, you have a situation where if you do not have jurors there to curtail the power of the judiciary, which has become increasingly more revenue-driven, as a practicing attorney, where I've seen, for instance, where courts now more and more depend on revenue, you need the average citizen to say, wait a second. Are we going to put justice and the will of the people first and foremost? And I present to you that you need those jurors to serve as that counterbalance to an ever-increasing revenue-driven justice system. I have practiced for a number of years. I know as a former administrative law judge how the system works. The system works in such a way so that it is designed not only to dispense justice efficiently, but also in a way in which it brings money in. For example, you brought up a number of cases, right? And that talks about how expensive jury trials are. Well, here in various types of states, that every time that there is a criminal conviction, they will attach a certain monetary fee to that conviction. Certain convictions carry higher fees than others. If you allow the judiciary to be able to generate its own revenue by deciding which charges are ultimately going to be found and are be found or unfounded, then you're allowing them to essentially have a running tab. Jurors, given their experience, given the fact that their society, given the fact that they are truly living in the world and operating in the world, unlike us lawyers who are, ever since we've been in law school, we've become further detached because we participate in a system that seems to be a little separated that's separate from the normal drudgeries of society. Essentially, we're out of touch. And so we need those, we need 12 common, ordinary men and women to bring us back in, to hone us to the reason for why we're there, and also to act as a counterbalance to the force of the state. I present to you, having served in a system that when you look at how criminal fines are assessed, when you look at how certain penalties are being, people have to pay various types of penalties. You need people to be able to say, is this in society's best interest? And I present to you that if you left the judiciary, the executive branch to make those decisions, you would find that the people will be used as financial, there will be a financial incentive to enforcing various types of crime.
Perfect. Thank you, Broad Street. And Lawyer Chick, to you, please.
Hey, everybody. And Sarah, good to see you again. Fewer than 4% of civil cases and 2 to 3% of criminal cases actually go to a jury trial. Jury trials are not the most economic way to spend, I guess, justice minutes, but I would argue that jury nullification is one of the most important safeguards we have in our democracy. And it is incredibly crucial to uphold, yes, I guess, constitutional rights that we hold dear, but also to give people a voice in fighting and protesting and canceling out unjust laws that conflict with community values. Let me just hate a little bit more on jury trials just for a minute, because jury trials can also be very expensive. So they do become corrupt, not for the reasons that you think. It's that in order to take a case to a jury trial, it's just so freaking expensive. And when you get to like O.J. Simpson levels of jury trials, you have jury consultants, and people will spend, or companies, corporations particularly, will spend millions of dollars on a jury trial. But the good news is that they do reflect the community that they represent. So you might have a pro-worker jury, or you might have a pro-plaintiff jury, or in a place like Delaware, you'll have a pro-business jury. But I just really want to harp on jury nullification for a minute, because I think if we lose that, we lose this like ripcord that we have that could actually, save the life of democracy when we really need it, or at least bring the will of the people into the courtroom. Okay, so going back to the 1670s, the trial of William Penn actually ended in a jury nullification verdict, where William Penn, one of our founding fathers, was preaching his religion, preaching his faith, and was fined. And the jurors were actually imprisoned for coming out in support of his free speech. And this, the Court of Common Pleas, I guess the Supreme Court at the time, actually overruled that and established the principle of jury independence. So that was as far back as 1670. Then you had jury nullification support and protect freedom of the press, when a man named Zenger, a New York newspaper editor, was actually jailed for criticizing a colonial governor. You had juries in the North that allowed abolitionists and others who helped slaves escape. So there were juries that overturned, essentially through a jury trial, the Fugitive Slave Act in the 1850s. It was juries who ended prohibition, because juries continuously refused to convict people who were charged with liquor laws, with violating liquor laws. Assisted suicide is brought to us in 11 states and the District of Columbia, because Jack Kevorkian was nullified several times by a jury. The law is a living, breathing system, right? And people change and lives change, and juries reflect our changing values. So now we have, assisted suicide. Some argue that the O.J. Simpson verdict was the jury nullifying his guilty verdict. I would say that was just good lawyering, okay? In modern days, you have a lot of drug-related cases, especially around medical marijuana, where the juries just took off these crazy long mandatory minimum sentences when people genuinely had medicine plants for their own medical care, and they proved it, and the juries overturned it. And the last thing that modern law has seen juries nullify, or the last types of laws, are laws around environmental activism. Many juries have just reduced the sentence from like felony to misdemeanor, reduced the fines, nullify the charges altogether. And one of the cases I've been following was the case of like border kindness down in the southern Texas-Mexico border. There were an organization called No More Deaths that were looking at like 30 years for putting water out for people who were crossing the desert. And the jury nullified their case. And I believe that was in the past 5 or so years. So jury nullification all day. If we don't have it, our system overall will be sorely lacking.
Perfect. Thank you so kindly to all of our panelists. As a kind reminder out there to Mater Nation, we're going to get through our debate, then we will move into closing statements. We will read and respond to your kind super chats, and then, of course, your favorite part, we will move into open panel dumpster fire. If you have something to add to this panel, stick around, you'll have the opportunity. Outside of that, lady and gentlemen, I leave the floor open to you.
I mean, I don't even know where to start with both your openings. To be honest, I feel like Lawyer Chick made some arguments for our side, right? You know, talking about how expensive it is to have a bunch of people break the law. You're talking about like, oh, people refuse to charge people of things that were against the law. How is this good? That you're just admitting to the chaos of jury trials. I don't understand how your argument is good thing we can have people that break the law and make sure that people aren't charged of things they should be charged with. What do you...
Did you listen to everything else I said? Did you listen to everything else I said?
Yeah, you named off a bunch of times that jury nullification was apparently good. You said something about fewer than 4% of civil cases. I think 3% go to criminal, go to jury. I don't know how that's an argument for your side if you're just saying, well, hardly any go to it. So yeah, let's fucking exit out. We don't use it for hardly any trials anyway. So let's get it out of here. Right, like I didn't see any arguments for your side. I thought you were arguing on my side.
Then you were only listening to speak.
Wait, what?
Well, no,
then you were only listening to think about what you were going to say to argue, and you didn't listen to anything else I said.
That seems like a mom comment, but okay.
That's a good assertion.
I don't know what the hell that's supposed to mean.
It's true.
It's not an argument. I mean, he posed questions. I might even disagree with some of those questions, but that's not an answer, right? That's just a quip. But since you don't have an argument, I'll go ahead and hop in. So you talked a lot about jury nullification, right? It seems that that's your tagline. That seems that you're something very passionate about. And as a libertarian, right, I think jury nullification is based, right? I absolutely do think that it's amazing. However, you know, in my opening statement, I understand you probably wrote your opening statement beforehand, so this is what this part is for, right? I think the concept of jury nullification is what, 82, 83 Federalist Papers were really talking about, right? That they knew that juries were not as efficient. They knew that juries were expensive. Like, Patrick Henry admitted this, Brutus admitted this, Hamilton, Madison, they all knew that this was an expensive way to do it, and that they probably lacked the expertise of like a panel of judges like they use in Israel, or judges and lawyers like they use in France, or, panels that, or bench trials that are used in most civil cases. And so that's like a lot of that debate is about civil cases, right? And the distinction between civil and criminal. And so I do agree with you, right? That jury nullification is a good thing and that we ought to do it. I would say, if you read Lysander Spooner's an essay on jury trials from 1850, I think he makes a really good argument that the actual problem is in the contradiction of the state's monopoly on justice and violence in and of itself, and that the idea that the state is doing jury instruction, that the idea that the law becomes ever increasingly more complex and outside of the domain of the average person, is that institutional favor was already in favor of the state. And we see an ever expanding growth of state power and abuses of power. And that jury nullification, as I said in my opening, is often excluded, not explicitly, but might as well be in voir dire when we're selecting jurors, right? people are going to get rid of lawyers. They're going to get rid of paralegals. They're going to get rid of people that are politically aware. They're going to get rid of people that are too smart. Anybody that actually knows about jury nullification and is passionate about it is going to get off of the fucking jury most times, unless they lie, unless they hide something, unless they violate the law. There's very, very rarely does jury nullification actually work in the modern context. And that's why when you gave modern examples as opposed to, pre-Constitution examples such as 1735, where we're talking about the publishers in New York, right? That's why you gave so many older examples, because modern examples showcase that what ends up happening is jury nullification is like, oh, we're going to charge them with one crime, a secondary charge, but not the main charge because we feel bad about this. It's not true jury nullification in the sense of this ought not be legal because this law is immoral, and therefore I will fight against this immoral law by saying that this person is innocent as opposed to guilty.
But this is fundamentally not happening in modern day practice. I mean, I'm someone that practices in courts every single day. And I see where jurors are coming in and saying that this is the wrong charge. These are not the right thing to do. A perfect example, this actually occurred in the state of Virginia, in which a young lady was prosecuted because she essentially checked the box that says she did not use marijuana on a firearm, a form to obtain a concealed weapon and also a firearm. Unfortunately, the facts behind that case was that a child had found the firearm inside of a nightstand, brought that gun to school, and shot a teacher. Well, the prosecutors essentially wanted to they let the child off easy, but they went hard for the mother. And what happened was that it was essentially the prosecutors knew that they were going to be unable to find a set of jurors that were going to convict a single mother that was essentially working two jobs and had lied on an application to receive a firearm because she lived in a bad neighborhood. And it was the threat of jury nullification that actually kept that young lady from serving a mandatory minimum of about 2 years. I think it's 2 or 3 years. So again, if you don't have that threat of 12 jurors that are willing to say, you know what, we need to do the right thing, this is not in society's best interest, then you know what, the judiciary can act in a completely unfettered manner.
So 2 things to respond to that quickly. One, I feel like you're kind of proving my point a little bit, right? Which is, obviously I'm not a legal positivist, right? I don't necessarily believe that I'm an ANCAP, right? I'm against the state's monopoly on the justice system anyways. But the concept that you explained how it would be difficult to find a jury that wasn't sympathetic, right? Which I think really leads into to part of the problem with it, is that if we're engaged in objective justice and we recognize, even you recognize, that the jury is going to be swayed by the circumstances of altruism and collectivist thought and putting themselves in that person and emotions, as opposed to the letter of the law, that this does get us further away from objective justice and instead gets us closer to, something that you believe is base. Now, in this specific instance, I may think, yeah, that's probably base. I'm against charging people with nonviolent crimes, especially, second and third order consequences of other actors. But I mean, the rule, the exception proves the rule. Like, you're obviously going to find examples where jury nullification works. Like, there's that is true. But the thing is that the overwhelming majority of cases, as Lawyer Chick pointed forward, jury trials are punished by the state in terms of, plea deals. Most of these cases aren't even going to the jury to begin with. But if they do indeed choose the jury, or, assuming that is a choice insofar as it's, a rock and a hard place, you're overwhelmingly, I would say, that juror nullification is not this linchpin portion of our legal system, right? I fail to see that. And so I pause it one more time before I let Speakeasy and other people hop in. My final question, which is, why is it right to impose a jury trial on someone that doesn't want a jury trial? Why is that more closely going to get us towards objective justice, or is going to avoid tyranny for that person or for the system as a whole?
Well, people can choose to have a bench trial as well. They don't have to have a jury trial. In many jurisdictions,
in many cases, in many jurisdictions. So you're wrong, right?
Okay.
Is there at least one? Is there at least one where a jury trial is forced upon them? Happens all the time.
Forced upon them? You mean if they don't want to plea?
No, you can listen. If you're in a civil case, right, and another person says, I want a jury trial, the other person doesn't, guess what? They don't get a choice. There are certain capital crimes where they do not get a choice. There are certain consumer protection cases, right, where it's mandated that there is a jury trial. So there are plenty of people that are forced to have a jury trial. So it's not a right that they have.
Okay, so then why not advocate for everybody to have an option that they can have a bench trial or a jury trial, as opposed to completely abolishing jury trials? Why not that?
Well, that's separate to the debate. But I mean, if you want to come closer to my side and get rid of some jury trials, I mean, I'd be okay with that. Like, I'd be okay with a compromise coming to my side, and saying that this is a problem. Yeah.
Well, I see the flaws in a jury trial, but the argument is, should we abolish them? And I'm saying no. I mean, I definitely see there are flaws in them, but I also think that the importance of them outweighs.
What's the reason to keep them?
Are you against? Are you saying that you're for the jury trial as an option, but that you would get rid of them being imposed in all of those other cases? Are you willing to say today?
You mean like
you would
one
get rid
party?
Of the imposition of,
that you mean if one party
capital,
on a jury
certain
trial?
capital crimes, consumer protection crimes, etc.
No, I think that everybody should have the option for a bench trial. Absolutely. Though I don't have a problem with that. If people want to put it in the hands of one judge, that's fine with me.
Right, and I
think so. You believe the jury trial shouldn't be imposed; that it should be a choice. But your argument is that choice must stay there, that they can choose the jury trial.
Well, what you're saying is one party gets to choose. So I guess that's part of the adversarial legal system. So if you want to abolish the whole adversarial legal system, then sure, one shouldn't be imposed on the other. That's what it sounds like you're saying.
No, my argument is that it's not a right when it is imposed upon you. So there is no right to trial by jury if it is imposed upon you. Correct?
So the right be imposed upon you.
You were referring to the civil lawsuits, though, right?
The right to the jury.
There's criminal as well.
The right to you have to look at who the right attaches to. The right of the jury trial attaches to the individual that is most susceptible to the machinery of the state. In most cases, in all cases, it is a defendant first and foremost. The person that has to endure the substantial loss has a right to being able to essentially choose their own fate. But I think going back to your original argument where you talked about objective justice as someone that has participated in the system and has done jury trials, both as a public defender and overseeing them, there is no such thing as objective justice because we all bring, including the judges and the lawyers, we're bringing bias into that particular arena. The other thing is that, and I mentioned earlier in my open, that it's not true. Essentially, if you've done jury trials and you've had an opportunity to practice as long as I have, and essentially, if you've ever done trial advocacy and have an opportunity to teach those types of classes where, we train young lawyers to go in, we are taught to pull on the emotions and the heartstrings of people. So we are not objectives. If we were simply presenting cases in a binary manner, I assure you that even judges would go to sleep. And you talk about the complexity of law.
Go to sleep.
Right. Isn't that an argument against me? Isn't that an argument against you? My argument is that jurors are too susceptible to the swaying of emotions and things like that. And you're saying, I've been a lawyer, I've practiced a bunch, and so I know law is an objective. First and foremost, that's nonsense. There's an objective right answer. Someone either killed someone or they didn't kill someone. They either stole property or they didn't steal property. The process, right, can be filled with biases and flaws and things of that nature. But the idea that objective justice cannot exist is simply not true.
Objective justice cannot exist essentially because when you look at the system, and I'm licensed in just a handful of states and I practice in just a handful of states. However, when you look at the fact that because part of your argument, if I have to frame your first part of your argument, is you're talking about, placing this high holy standard of the people in the system, the judges and the lawyers. Well, let's look at the fact that you have elective judges that ultimately are trying to make sure that they stay on the bench. So I give you a perfect example.
Tough on crime.
In the jurisdiction
Yeah,
which
but I'll agree with all of this, Bully. People are biased. Judges are biased too. I'll agree with all of this. This doesn't change.
It's not an argument
with the jury. Those biased people don't get held accountable, right? The judges can be held accountable. We have written reasoning. You can have a system where people can go audit the cases after, and if they want to bring an appeal up or anything, they can do this. This doesn't take away citizens from being involved. This is just like people are biased. Yes, sure, but that doesn't it's not an argument.
The statement that you just made, and at least in the jurisdictions that I practice, is fundamentally wrong because judges being held accountable would actually be counter to the independent judiciary. The fact of the matter is that the judges and especially prosecutors are not held accountable, which is the reason why.
So when you have appeals and oversight, that's not them being held accountable.
You're very limited.
That has won appeals,
so they are held accountable.
And as someone that has actually argued appeals and have actually taken my arguments to the highest court in my state, I assure you, when those cases ultimately get sent back to the lower courts, the only thing the judges ever have said is, "Oh, good. I'm glad you reversed me on appeal." Well, guess what? They're still on the bench. The fact of the matter is that when you have prosecutors that have immense,
this is a different argument.
It's not, because the first argument that
you're just saying there's judges that I think are corrupt and they're still on the bench.
No, but you're making it sound like it's so easy to challenge a judge, Speakeasy, and you're making it seem like you can just appeal anything willy-nilly, and you can't. Appeals are very specific.
Okay,
not easy to just appeal a judge, right?
Right. The argument that you're essentially
making, you can do it, right? I'm not talking about easy. I don't care about the things being easy or if it touches the people's feelings. I don't give a shit about all that. We're talking about the law, right? We're talking about shit that holds our society together. The whole reason you got dudes in jail doing TikToks and all this goofy shit going on is because we don't hold to the letter of the law. We're letting a bunch of retards decide shit.
Well, and I assure you that, and Fabian's argument is that the fact of objective law, and I am telling you that it's not objective law. Just if I'm allowed to,
I agree.
This argument is that you have the judges, for instance, that because they want to be reelected, and they don't want to offend a certain constituency, that they will ultimately make different decisions. I'll give you a perfect example. In the Commonwealth of Virginia, Mothers Against Drunk Driving is very active. In fact, every time there is a DUI trial in the vast majority in certain jurisdictions, they will actually show up and sit in front of judges, and they will make scorecards. And when that judge comes up to be reviewed, because I think in that particular jurisdiction, I think it's about like every 6 to 8 years, there's a survey that is sent, and that judge, and I've seen where judges are swayed by those surveys and are swayed by those special interest groups. So
and I can bring up cases like Harvey Weinstein, where there was dudes on the jury, right? And I can respond the same with a case. We can go case for case, right? Harvey Weinstein, right? There was literally jurors that said they were being bullied during the deliberation into convicting people. Into convicting him. So we had a problem. What did we have? We had a trial that ended, one with a charge, one with an acquittal, and one was a mistrial, all because of stupid juries. This is the problem. In Florida, you have over 100 cases that were overturned or reversed because of faulty jury instructions. The whole fucking system is a flawed structure. It just needs to go. It's not farmers deciding if you stole a horse anymore. You know what I mean?
Broad Street, can I meet you halfway here, right? Like, I know we don't have to get so blood sportsy, right? I understand that your argument is that there is corruption within the system. Obviously, as a libertarian, I'm going to agree with that, right? I think the system is inherently corrupt because it's a monopoly on power and violence, and that there isn't voluntary justice systems, competing firms, arbitration, insurance companies being able to actually compete. And that is why there is no accountability within our justice system. And that it is very difficult. I absolutely agree with what Lawyer Chick was saying, right? when you stated that, like, appeals are not an easy thing, right? Especially when it comes to like criminal cases where you need exculpatory evidence, or you need something to bring. You can't just be like, my bad. You have to be like, how were their rights violated in some way? How is there some new evidence, etc.? I'm with you, right? And I'm with you in the sense that that accountability can be difficult for judges, and that the concept of certain states where they're elected and other states where they're appointed by the state legislator can be like that level of accountability may not be up to snuff to what we the people insofar as we're a collective, or that democracy has any fucking value anyways. I think it's nonsense, but I get all that, right? My problem is that your argument only brings it up to the level of our argument, right? Which is, our argument is that or to the intros, which is that people bring their biases. The state has a bias, the people have a bias. Now, if you would like to admit that the jury is intended to be an institutional bias against the state and not necessarily the best means of looking at the evidence and being able to convict of a crime, then like we can move from there, right? Because it is my contention that jurors are retarded, and we all know that they are, and anybody that says that they aren't,
and lawyers and judges are not. I mean,
well, I would say that I tend to be less retarded than the average person. Let's look at the IQ of an average lawyer and an average judge, and then let's look at the IQ of the average American citizen. You're going to find 100 versus what, like 112, 115. And also, what we were talking about again is that lawyers and judges are trained to engage in critical thinking and probabilistic thinking within their field of expertise. Where I brought up earlier, research specifically, does college teach critical thinking 2016, which is a meta-analysis from the University of Minnesota, found that only roughly 15 to 20% of people are capable of taking critical thinking skills and probabilistic thinking that they've learned even under education into new and novel domains. Juries that lack expertise in any of these, 9 of those jurors are simply going to ignore logic. They are going to ignore evidence to a certain degree. And that's not counting that, like, and there's going to be 3 or 4 people, right? 60% of people in mock trials and in exit surveys, change their opinion based off of a strong opinion of another juror. Like, these are sheep, right? And my argument is how is yours
put me in a room with other jurors, and I'm convincing everybody of what I want. That's the problem,
why is it
right?
that the jury is this superior mechanism? Right. I'm not arguing that judges are corrupt, that the state's justice system has problems. My argument is that it's an inferior means of getting to the law.
It is fundamentally not inferior, because essentially the machinery that is occurring is designed to work for them, which is the reason down at the bottom of the Broad Street Bully is we the people, right? You are trying to advocate for a bifurcated system in which the other side somehow has a superior knowledge, skills, and ability to be able to bring forth a more perfect result. And I'm essentially telling you,
I think you guys could interpret the law better than maybe me and Fabian in certain areas. Well, because you were educated there, right? Well, that makes sense, does it not?
Right, but also because we were also.
Wait, doesn't that make sense though?
We may
you agree with this, right?
And what you're arguing essentially is the difference between mathematics and applied mathematics. When you apply mathematics differently, it works differently in the real world. And when these things occur in the real world, and it's completely different. And I was positing a story about DUI, right? And how essentially we wanted to make sure these groups wanted to make sure that folks were taken off the street for DUI. Well, what the special interest groups that applied pressure towards the prosecutors or Commonwealth attorneys across these various jurisdictions didn't realize was that fundamentally that there were issues with intoxilizers. There were issues in terms of training for police officers. But you know who picked that up in these particular court cases? The jury did. They saw that the fact that the police officers weren't properly trained. They saw that the fact that police officers were being incentivized to stop certain people in certain neighborhoods. They saw the fact that that the law was not being equally applied here. So I'm presenting to you that the fact that, but for the jury being there, it would have been a gross misapplication of the law, and they did their job, which was to act as a counterbalance to the machinery of the state.
Yeah,
But,
so
okay,
this
so
is
you
the
hold on.
problem.
Can I
Wait,
speak easy? Can I do this one real quick? Super
I
quick?
just want to. I have to say something. This you're
All right,
talking
go ahead.
about the same jurors, right? The ones that they pointed out the misconduct of the police. You said these are the same jurors that locked up a police officer that dedicated his life to protecting people because some fentanyl addicted thief overdosed underneath his knee. You understand that? This is the same jurors you're talking about.
What are you referring to?
That's Derek Chauvin is still sitting in jail today for shit that he didn't do. Okay, that's a problem because of jurors thinking that he was some racist cop. We had a white guy and a black guy die of an overdose, and all of a sudden we got to put the cop in jail. Do you understand how stupid this is? But O.J. Simpson can chop his wife's head off and let's let him free, bro. Do you understand how stupid it is to have the random person making
be fair, okay? The juries were also afraid of the city burning down.
It's insane, man. It's insane.
Right, but we also had the same prosecutor who brought charges. I was listening to a Joe Rogan show today where you had the same Department of Justice that brought charges against someone that ultimately outed the CIA's program against torture, right? And the same judge that accepted a plea deal knowing that the elements of espionage were not met, right? All done without a jury because the individual was pressed to take an
How did
appeal.
we know that's what they did? Broad Street, how did we know that's what they did? Because there was paperwork, we could hold that person accountable.
Right. And unfortunately,
how do we know what the juries are doing? We don't.
Right. We know what
they're not accountable. They need no written reasoning.
There is a procedural mechanism that is allowed where you can essentially many jurisdictions poll juries, understand how to think. And the other thing is too, as procedural safeguard, is that you also have the directed jury.
So you want to take citizens
you have directed jury
out of their everyday life, make them decide conviction,
easy, let him finish,
and then also put their life on the line.
Right, and as a counterbalance to the power of the jury, as it actually works, you have something called a judgment of a matter of law. You also have the summary judgment, and you also have a directed verdict, where the judge, if the jury goes way too deep in and does not follow the law, you still have those three procedural devices to bring it back in and make sure that there is a fair result. And this is the argument that Lawyer Chick was making, is that you need the system to have a checks and balance. And goes back to my original argument, is that you have to be able to curtail the power of the state. And the last thing I'll say, you talked earlier about idiots in jail who are making TikToks. Well, boo-boo, that is all a part of the Department of Prisons. It has absolutely nothing to do with what I and thousands and millions of other lawyers do, which is to dispense justice and make sure that everyone gets their day in court and has a sense of fairness. So I think that we need more.
You said it was the last thing. Sorry.
Well, like that was.
Let me hop in real quick.
Let me hop in real quick. That was brought up for though.
Speak easy, real quick.
I know.
So what we've seen is I think a classic example of like why people tend to hate lawyers, right? We have a lot of lawyering and bickering. We have a lot of this, but we're not getting the actual argument, right? I've presented an argument. I've presented a question that is still unanswered. And so, like, to get us back on track as opposed to like all this nitpicking, because our argument is that a jury trial is a slot machine. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, right? And all you're doing is kind of proving our case with all of these ramblings about what about this case, what about that case, what about this case, what about that case. Yeah, we agree. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, because it's a slot machine of retards. So I just have another question. Maybe we'll get back on the topic, or we'll talk about this. To either of you, would you be willing right now to go to any courthouse that is engaged in criminal cases right now and hand out pamphlets to jurors or to anyone that explains what juror annulment is? Or are you afraid of being arrested for jury tampering if you do that?
That's actually a very good question. So in terms of being able to jury tampering, I would be afraid to hand out and when the minute the jury is impaneled, to hand out a pamphlet that discusses anything about jury nullification, right? Because once they're impaneled, then they can only consume what's being brought in court. However, if you've ever sat in a jury trial and you realize that the amount of seriousness that these jurors take towards being able to make a decision about one of their fellow citizens, the amount of time and reflection that they take, it's awe-inspiring. The fact of the matter is that if you've ever sat in a bench trial and you realize how out of touch some of these lawyers are, because and also let's be honest here, the judges, because with the judges you only get the upper echelon. These guys don't know what it is to be the average man, and what it's about to be able to have the stress and anxiety of a hearing, and also they're so far detached that they don't even understand about what's in the public's best interest. So I don't.
Do they not have teeth?
So the answer is, hold on. So the answer,
are they tied up in caves somewhere?
So-
What are you
so-
talking
hold on.
about? Wait, just a second. This is a crazy.
The answer is
claim
no.
he
You're
just made.
stepping on my
What are
dunk,
we
right? Like
talking
the
about,
answer is
though?
no. You just gave a bunch of platitudes about like the average man and the out of touch people, but the answer is no. The answer is that this concept that the founding fathers were arguing as to why we need jury trials wasn't because of their effectiveness or any of that. It was as a means of combating the state, but because the state is already in charge of the process, is in charge of the jury instruction, and these people don't know what's going on, that no, you wouldn't stand in front of a courthouse where they're doing criminal cases and hand out pamphlets that explain what jury nullification is. And so this entire concept that jury nullification is this sacrosanct lauded thing to protect the system that the founding fathers fought for is a moot point in today's legal system.
Can I interrupt you?
It's
I don't think the founding fathers fought for it. I think it was a function of jury trials that is a very necessary part of a functioning jury system. So I don't think it was like the corner. I mean, I don't know where I said we fought on
jury
it.
system.
I think to have, yes, I think as an option, it is important
want the
to
jury
have.
system. Do you understand that's what we're talking about?
I get
Abolishing
that.
the jury system?
Yeah, I do. I can.
Okay, so I want to take out the thing that is good for having it. Do you understand?
Well, what I'm saying is that I never said the founding fathers fought for it. I just think it's a good thing to have to.
Yeah, I didn't strongly.
You know what they did fight for? All of us to have
Papers 83 and 82.
But what they did fight for is all of us to have a fair trial, not a fucking roulette of random retards off the street.
It says unbiased too, which is, we've all admitted that the Constitution is false here. I'd like to point that out because Broad Street Bully and Lori Chick both claim that that jurors as well as judges are biased. So Sixth Amendment's already a contradictory nonsense fucking wipe my ass with fucking thing anyways. So let's get into, we're already in new territory, right? And the territory is how ought we conduct these cases.
I was still answering your question. I wouldn't hand out a jury nullification pamphlet. I wouldn't.
Yeah, of course, because you'd probably risk going to jail.
That's not why. I mean, you're making assumptions. I wouldn't because it's just not something that you want to promote. It's something that happens when the law is unjust. It's something that happens when people get together.
Tagline says jury nullification forever. What the fuck do you mean it's something you wouldn't promote?
It should exist. It should exist. If we
secretly
abolish,
lawyer's gonna say that because you want to be able to sway a bunch of people and use good rhetoric to tell them to do what you want them to do. Of course, as a lawyer, you would want that. But as a fucking citizen that wants just laws, I don't want that shit happening.
Well, if you had seen the kind, can I?
Wait a minute. I wasn't done talking. What do you mean, let her? I wasn't done talking.
You did interrupt her to begin with.
What do you mean? She stopped talking and I was answering. What are we talking about here? Listen, you put me against a jury. Look at me. They're all going to say guilty. Okay, doesn't matter what happened. If you put me in the room of jurors, whatever I want them to say, they're gonna fucking say because I can be good with rhetoric. That's the problem with juries. It's just bullshit. It's a system of feelings disguised as justice. We the people. Bullshit.
I mean, I disagree with you. And if you think juries are biased or flawed, I mean, there's some pretty horrific judges. I think it's, incredible that you would think just leaving it in the hands of judges is any better.
Well, I think I made the argument very clearly why leaving in the hands of like a panel of judges like they do in Israel or in France or in Germany or where bench trials are more common in the UK for all civil cases and things like that. I think I made it fairly clear. And the problem is that I absolutely agree that everyone has cognitive biases, right? Like you cannot get rid of cognitive bias in humans. The difference is as I stated very clearly, and I gave you the research, if you want to look more into the meta-analysis, which I think is a good way of getting, a large amount of research, literature review and meta-analysis to just kind of get an overview, is that what we're talking about is that many of these cases require a complex understanding of the law that jurors lack. And then what they get is they get they get instruction so that they can attempt to understand what the law is or isn't. And then what the research shows is that the average person is not capable of applying even in previous training those critical thinking and probabilistic views to novel concepts, to new things, to people that are not, they're not professional jurors, right? They're just people brought off the street. And so what ends up happening is those cognitive biases become stronger. They are more likely to be swayed by recent testimony. They are more likely to be swayed by people that are, vivid in their accounts as opposed to people that are dull or boring. They're more likely to be swayed by the rhetoric, involved in the charisma. They're less likely to look at it logically, right? That whole Plato's tripartite ethos, pathos, logos. They're far less likely to look at the logic of the arguments. And the average everyday person believes in inherent contradictions and they place emotional bias on people. I think, one of the examples that Speakeasy and I were talking about before, right, was like, the Casey Anthony trial, where the defense just brings up, they're like, oh, well, maybe her dad traumatized and abused her as a child. And then nobody brought it up again. And it's like, that was clearly had a powerful impact on the jury because you had a crying, attractive girl who was abused by her dad. And like that, it doesn't matter what the evidence is. It matters how they feel, because at the end of the day, these people are not professionals. So they do not put their critical thinking skills to use when it comes to being a juror. What they do is they vibe out how they feel. And yes, there's some level of logic. Yes, they consider the evidence to some degree, but they are far more likely than a panel of judges or other systems to be swayed by that. What is why do you keep flexing the superiority of this? That's what I want to hear. I want to hear, again, I'll repeat my question that I had in my opening statement, which is why is a jury trial that is forced upon people, and you say, hey, I'm not necessarily for enforcing it upon people, but why is a jury trial used against people in all the other cases against their will superior? Why is a jury trial superior to a panel of judges or arbitration, right? Would you yourself, if you knew you were innocent of a crime, would you choose a jury trial, or would you choose arbitration, or would you choose a bench trial? Like, what would you be most comfortable with?
That's a good question. And with the jury trial, you're not only getting 12 jurors at the end of the day, you're also getting an opportunity to present all of your evidence and all of your discovery and all of your witnesses and all of your documents and get all of that on the record. So that's also a benefit of jury trials, because arbitration,
the judge doesn't say
you can do it without a jury.
Arbitration is flawed. You're asking about a bench trial. I mean, arbitration actually, it's faster. It's easy. If people will come
Wojciech's going to be a libertarian by the end of the night, boys. Pro arbitration, pro getting rid of the violation of abuses on people that are forced to have jury trials. Like, yeah, man, you just keep coming closer and closer to my side. By the end of the night, you'll be with me.
We can agree on things and still not agree on an overall.
Right. One of the areas of justice where jury trials really are not used as much as in a juvenile justice system. And I don't know if you guys remember the Cash for Kids scandal that occurred in Pennsylvania, where you had a judge that was essentially sentencing kids to long sentences so that he could receive a kickback. Well, it was more than one judge. So they were receiving kickbacks from the
millions and millions of dollars.
Well, absolutely.
Yeah, we just saw this with the Irina case, right? Where she let that guy out over and over and over again, and her wife was also in charge of, some of the facilities that they send people to get mental health treatment. So instead of putting them in jail, she's incentivized towards that. I mean, yeah, there's corruption in the judicial system, but again, you keep giving me platitudes and you keep informing me that you've been a lawyer for a long time, but I'm not really hearing a lot of arguments against the claims I'm making. I really like you to argue against
real quick, to respond to you there, Bully. Hold up. I want to directly respond to what you're saying, Bully. The kids for cash example is an outlier.
My experience as a lawyer for someone that has done trials, because I have seen.
Yes, we get it. You're a lawyer, bro. We knew that.
And I'm also bringing to the fact the current situation where the cash for kids situation, where but for if there was a jury there, maybe the citizens of Pennsylvania wouldn't have to pay $200 to $300 million some odd dollars to kids that were falsely imprisoned.
Two corrupt judges. All right, hold up. Two corrupt judges, Bully. Two corrupt judges out of thousands. Okay, and the system exposed them because they had to leave a paper trail.
How were they?
All you're doing is pointing out an outlier and saying, "Well, look, there's sometimes a bad thing here."
Yeah, again, I've said it before, I'll say it again, right? Like, our assertion is that jury trials are slot machines of random retards. And if you keep bringing up examples where sometimes the retards get it right, that's fine. I'm okay with that. But the problem is that it doesn't prove the superiority of jury trials. I have an argument as to why panels of judges are better at doing this.
Bench trial.
Right, but I have brought evidence. You haven't made an actual argument.
Right. So evidence, one, cash for kids. Evidence, the system of justice that just occurred where in New York, where you had an individual that was just sentenced to 10 years on a bench trial where a judge misapplied the law, right? Mm-hmm. All the times, evidence where you have countless judges that are reversed on appeal because they've misapplied the law. A recent case in Texas where a judge
was yes, all you're saying is even professionals get it wrong sometimes too. So
hold on.
In the words of some famous rapper,
I think what they're looking for, what you are providing are the exceptions, not the rules, and that's what they're looking for is the rules. You're giving them the exceptions. So, for instance, if I say, women aren't stronger than men, right? But I'm stronger than that one dude, right? That might be the exception, but not the rule.
Right.
And I think that's what they're looking for is something outside of
Can I be more specific? Can I be more specific? To be more specific, what I'm saying is you keep making an inductive argument, right? And that inductive argument is that, but for, right? The claim is, but for the jury trial system, corruption would be larger or would tend towards a higher degree. There would be more problems because there wouldn't be a check of juries on judicial tyranny in some form, right? I am making
why the founders wanted them, but
right. Hopefully I'm steel manning your position, right?
They gave up the power in the first place.
Hold on, right? What I am making is a deductive argument, right? I am making the argument that yes, it is true that there are going to be instances or outliers or, rules that prove the exception where juries get it right and where they expose corruption in a system where another system might not, right? I'm not for the state's monopoly on the justice system. I'm for arbitrating firms and voluntary forms of justice. I want to get rid of the state's control over the justice system completely. But nevertheless, my argument is a deductive one. And my argument is that it is true that the jury selection selects for the average IQ people. It is true that other systems such as judicial panels, etc., selects for people that are more informed on the law, more informed on the cases, and tend to be a higher IQ. And therefore, when we are talking about getting towards the objective metric of whether or not someone did or did not commit a crime, it is true that it will tend towards a judicial panel or some other system of professional jurors, etc., will get closer to the truth, which I think, right, veritas is a value too, right, than the jury system. And my other argument is the just long story of history and the contradictions of the process as to why the founding fathers were wrong, that this was actually a bulkhead against judicial tyranny. That the judges and the system itself control this process, and that's why I brought up juror nullification pamphlets, right? Is that like what may have been true of the founding fathers, where everyone was aware of Zagetsky 1735, right? Where Chief Justice Jay Jones is telling people about juror nullification at every single one of his trials, and famously in Georgia versus Brailsford, I believe is the case in quite like the first time he did it was like the big one, like 1789, maybe. I'm not a lawyer. I'm trying to just remember, right? But right, like that system and you yourself in your opening statement, you claimed, right, that what we need is an informed and participating public. We do not live in a world like 1789 at the ratification of our Constitution, where we have an informed and participating public. And because of that, the jury system, for whatever power it supposedly had in the past, along with the ever increasing complexity of the law in a modern world, and technology and regulations and private equity and all of these things that are increasingly ever complicated, that an informed and participating public that you argued for is simply not possible.
Well, have you ever sat on a jury? It's the first. I want to go down the line of logic here. Have you ever sat on a jury?
No, I've been in criminal trials and watched them, but I've never. But that
okay. So you. Well,
no, he wants to do a test thing. That's fine.
No, I just want to go. If I follow down the line of logic. So I mean, to
be fair, have you?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I have federal jury and all.
Before you were a lawyer, yeah.
Well, they don't pick me anymore, right?
Yeah, because you know about jury annulment.
It's funny. Actually doesn't pick me. Who often strikes me is the prosecutor. Okay. Again, the machinery of the state. But
the word you'll be woke. Black lawyer, prosecutor, every time. I'm getting rid of that guy. That guy's a wrench in the system.
Every time. I'm actually more conservative than believe me not. But,
I knew from the deep voice I could hear the testosterone. But go ahead, make your argument.
Now you made me forget my damn point with that bit of laughter. But
you were asking if he had sat in a jury, and I was just curious of what this has to do with anything. I'm confused.
So, if you listen, I'm going to alleviate your confusion.
Well, I was reminding you, of course, I'm listening because I'm the only one who remembered what was fucking said. So if you remember what you fucking say, maybe you should listen to yourself.
So if you've ever sat in a jury and, first of all, you're talking about the average everyday slub. Those average everyday slubs and retards also includes high school teachers, professors. Okay, they include engineers, doctors.
There's a lot of retarded high school teachers.
And there's also a lot of retarded judges and lawyers. But the fact of the matter is, the first argument that Speakeasy had posited was that the fact that these are some random spindle wheel retards. They're not. These are people that sit amongst us every single day from a huge
random spindle wheel retard.
Right.
I can throw a rock out my window and hit 10 of them, bro. What are you talking about?
And if you look at certain judges and where they are plucked from, they usually come from, depending upon the jurisdiction, of course, very conservative schools, right? Schools that have a heavy bias, histories of racism and prejudice, things of that nature. So again, I mean, you're talking about.
Okay, hold on. I take your argument. The argument is, listen. The argument is that judges and lawyers, etc., also have their own biases, and they also have a bias towards the state because they are participating in the state, and that they might have certain biases towards wealth, right? But the problem is that your argument works in the flip side. Right? There's a reason that we have to have caps on punitive damages because jurors, the retards that they are, will be like, corporation bad, award them $10 billion. Like there's the same biases towards wealth and education and those things like that are also biases that juries have against companies like Nationwide when some fucking car accident is occurred. So again, it's not an argument against my claim. What you are doing is the same thing you have done all night, which is you have just brought it up by saying, oh, look at this example, oh, they have biases. You haven't actually engaged with what we're saying. Yes, we admit jurors have biases just as much as we admit the judges have biases. The argument, very fucking simply, please get to it, is the concept of the ability to navigate and be able to find objective truth about whether or not someone actually violated the law or didn't violate the law. And so long as you value crime being punished, so long as you value justice, so long as you value that the law is appropriately enforced and that it appropriately adjudicated for appropriate restitution and retribution, then the answer is simple, is that a panel of judges, a set of people that are professional juries, etc., are going to more often than not get the correct answer in those means. Obviously, there are outliers.
And this is the flaw in your argument, is that you're assuming that the justice system is set up for retribution. It is designed to operate for the public's best interest. And again, this is the reason why we have.
That is one of the flaws of the justice system, is that it doesn't focus enough on retribution.
And
I
for
agree.
the same system that you're still saying that it shouldn't be in the hands of slubs, in which it's are retards, that in which it's the people that it's supposed to serve. I mean, my God, man, you're essentially saying that the fact that three judges, okay, who are essentially being incentivized by the state to further concepts of judicial economy, to bring in revenue for the state so that the judiciary can continue to run, okay, compared to a set of 12 people who all they want to do is ensure that they make the right decision so that they have a better society.
No, what they want to do is they want to get off jury duty because they're forced to do it.
If you allow me to posit my argument, I promise you I won't pontificate. 12 folks that have given up their time, their money, who don't have a stake in the fight at all, compared to a judiciary that essentially operates and generates revenue from this machinery. I think
jury duty is mandatory. What are you talking about?
Jury
duty is mandatory.
Right, jury duty is mandatory. However, you and I both know that a lot of people don't.
Not everybody gets picked,
and not everybody also gets picked as well.
They're not giving up their time as some service to the fucking state or some service to the common man. They got a fucking letter in the mail that says you got to show up to jury duty or else, and then they go to fucking jury duty. What are you talking about?
And I bet you there's many people listening right now that have literally did everything they could to not be picked on purpose.
Yeah, that's true. Can I pose a thought process to the panel?
Let lawyer chicken speakeasy speak.
Yeah. I know we have the reasonable person standard, right? I know that's kind of built into part of the legal system in some wavelengths. But what is a reasonable person, right? And how do we determine what that is and who that is? And so basically, I think to my understanding, and maybe Lawyer Chick and Bully can correct me if I'm wrong, but to my understanding, the legal system is set up in a way where a reasonable person could come in to the situation, take in what's provided, and have a reasonable standard placed on that, and to their understanding based on just what's presented in front of them, could they go forth and provide an answer, what guilty, not guilty, negligence, so on and so forth. I just kind of wanted to pose that reasonable person standard into the panel and see what you can do with that.
If you want, I'll take the hill. So the reasonable proven person standard essentially is designed for folks to be able to bring in their understanding, right? Their cultural, societal norms, to be able to make decision on what a reasonable person would and would not do. But the reasonable prudent person standard isn't like overarching. The guardrail is still additional elements to be able to bring that in. It just provides a framework in which people can look at a certain action, right? So I would trust in a cross section, a wider cross section, 12 people to decide what reasonable looks like, than allowing one person. I think you get a little bit more closer to what is reasonable by taking a larger sample size.
I don't want one.
Just having one or two people or a panel of judges decide what that looks like.
Yeah, I wouldn't want just one person deciding it, right? I'd want like 3 to 5, depending on the severity of the case, right? A panel of judges, right? So it wouldn't be based on one person.
right? What's reasonable to you?
Well, that's actually like that's more speaking to my point when you're talking about what's reasonable to me, right? That's the whole thing. Like when you brought up earlier a case of a woman who her kid went and stole her gun, and like it was like, you know, the jury was like sympathetic because she was a single mother and blah blah blah. But if you would have put me in that room of jurors, I promise you we would have all convicted that bitch, okay? Because I don't give a fuck about what your situation was when it comes to the law. Again, I this is the problem with juries, that they're looking at this outside situation. Oh, but like this matters. No, it doesn't. It doesn't. That's not what matters.
It could also be argued that it's the benefit of a jury, that it's a jury of your peers and it's reasonable people that can think like you and feel like you and hear your reasonable story. And you all also, I think, Sarah made me think of something with this reasonable person standard. Fabian, you had said that a bunch of stupid people,
retard,
I guess.
say it.
Yeah.
Say it. Say it.
Say it. The word.
Listen. First, you know what? Listen. First, it was mongoloid, and then people started using mongoloid as an insult, and then people said that's an offensive word, and then it was imbecile, and then it was. It's literally, you will never stop people.
Actually, the hospital where those words.
I guarantee you in 20 years, people will be saying, if you call someone intellectually disabled, that's offensive.
Look, I'm with you. I get it. And you know what? So look, here's the thing. I'm from the, like the hospital where they came up with all those terms is in my hometown. So I'm very familiar with the gradient of, you know, scientific words that became insults. But in any case, I don't think people that serve on juries are retards. I think they're community members who some take it seriously, some don't, right? But some take it very seriously. Some want to be on a jury, some don't. Okay, fine. But what you all were saying earlier is that they don't think critically, or they can't think critically, or they're not thinking like lawyers and judges. And I think, like Bully said earlier, that's part of the, I guess, benefit or one of the beauties of a jury is that they can bring the whole case. Hold on, let me finish.
After
they can
today,
bring the
you might
whole
want to
case.
call me if you need a lawyer, not these two. Just saying.
They can bring
Go ahead, lawyer chick.
I mean, look, and also not all lawyers do jury trials. Not all lawyers argue in jury trials or want to do jury work. It's a specialty, right? But the lawyer's job in a jury trial is to, I guess, circumvent the need to think very critically. It's to prevent the evidence factually to a reasonable person so that they can decide within a shadow of a doubt, I mean, beyond the shadow of a doubt, or with the preponderance of the evidence, that there's liability or guilt. So that's part of the jury trial is what you're arguing is the problem with it. Inherently what it is.
Okay. So I was in the Army, right? And I'll tell you, when I was in the Army, there's kind of like 3 types of people that are in the Army, right? There's one type, which is super gung-ho Iowa corn-fed boys that are like, fuck yeah, America, right? And then the other person are people who were like in gangs, or, you know, they got somewhere really fucked up in life, and like their life was in shambles, and they decided they were going to turn their life around and join the Army, get away from like their local town and their gang, break these things, right? And go do something better with their life. And then the third type was people like me, right? Which were like people that had enough of a fucked up family background or unstable home or whatever to where, like, you know, they didn't do as well as they should have done in school, and they didn't do like the whole scholarship thing. So they're like, all right, fuck it, I'll join the Army, I'll get the GI Bill, and then I'll use the GI Bill to go to college, right? I kind of look at juries the same way, right? I agree that there's some group, some percentage of jurors that are there because they want to do their, you know, boomers most likely, right? Which, as we know, are absolutely retarded. Just send them an AI Facebook meme and see whether or not they believe it. And we know why they shouldn't be in charge of something like, I don't know, the the Kyle Rittenhouse case and whether or not AI interpolation is utilized in zooming in on whether or not the gun was in one direction or the other. I wouldn't trust a boomer within a fucking mile of looking at that, right? So mostly boomers, right? That are like super civically engaged.
I think we're going a little off track here, Fabian. I just
no, hold on. I'm gonna sink it in. I'm gonna sink it in. I'm gonna sink it in. I'm gonna land it. I'm gonna land this plane. Listen. So you got people like that, and then you have the other, like maybe it's 2/3, maybe it's half, right? Which are people that are so fucking stupid they couldn't get off of jury duty. Right? Like you're not, like genuinely, like a good chunk of jurors are people that are so dumb that they couldn't go to their they couldn't find a way to get out of jury duty when they were asked the questions because they were just sheepishly like, yes, and they couldn't come up with a good excuse or anything. So you're not even dealing with the regular caliber of retard that you find at Walmart. You're dealing with people that are so fucking stupid that they couldn't go to their regular job. They couldn't figure out a way to get off of jury duty. So yes, jurors are by and large retarded. And that's why I brought up in my opening statement that 60% of them are swayed to change their votes based off of more dominant jurors. These are not people we want looking at objective metrics and detailed things, looking at financial reports or looking at, cell phone data that's being argued one way or the other, whether or not it's AI interpolation or things like that, as to whether or not someone actually committed the crime.
Those are a small number of, like, you've made this complexity argument multiple times, and it's not true. Yeah. Those represent a small number of cases that the average juror sees. The vast majority of cases that are seen in a court can be understood by the average individual. In fact, even better, because you know what, as we talked about earlier, is because you have that reasonable, prudent person standard.
What do we need lawyers for then? What the fuck? What's the point of you guys?
Well, the number one job,
average guy can just interpret the law themselves.
You've asked a very good question. The number one job of the lawyer is to ensure that there is no fundamental miscarriage of justice. Okay,
it's to interpret the law properly and to be able to defend yourself properly. That's why, because the average idiot doesn't understand the law and can't defend themselves properly. Why do you think the average idiot can fucking make convictions properly? This is the dumbest thing. Do you understand? You guys are lawyers. You guys are in place because people are retards and can't defend themselves. Do you understand that?
Also, I just once again, it's not an argument to say it's a small number of cases. That's not a logical argument, by the way.
My job is to ensure that there's my fundamental job is to make sure there's no miscarriage of justice. My second job is to ensure that the fact that the Constitution is being equally applied in a way. And it's also to be able to determine whether or not there is a
lawyer talk right now, bro.
Or a defense. It is to serve as a counterbalance to the state's power, which is the reason, again, why the jury system was established. And this whole complexity argument about AI.
Can you make an argument about that? You haven't really made you've made very few arguments. I'm just curious. Can you make an actual argument? Hold on. Can you make an actual argument as to why that is actually meaningfully checking state power as opposed to just a case example here or there? Can you make like a deductive argument?
Well, we made that argument. The first argument was about bias.
No, you didn't.
Right? We talked about implicit bias. I think Lawyer Chick did an
institutionalized bias.
I also talked about that as well. And I even gave you my experience as an administrative law judge, because we have to receive training in bias because it's so prevalent in the judiciary. Okay. The other argument that I made, we talked about the financial incentive, and I brought up the cash for kids argument as well, which you seem to poo-hoo away.
I responded directly to it. What do you mean? I literally responded directly to the cash for kids thing.
I also talked about
two judges out of thousands of judges and said, oh, look, we have two corrupt judges, so judges can be corrupt too.
Right. I also talked about, and then I even moved further away from justice about the miscarriage of justice and corrupt judges, and I talked about the immense pressure that special interests such as Mothers Against Drug Driving, domestic rights organizations,
all of these are true for juries.
They place on judges. Okay,
This is such a pathetic argument. You are making our argument for us and filibustering.
They're not applying
Make an argument
to 12 average citizens who do not have a dog in the fight, other than the fact
you
that
think
they want to make sure
that makes
this
it
is
better that they don't
nonsense.
have the dog
This
in the fight?
nonsense.
Oh my
This is nonsense.
God.
You think political activist organizations and political parties and pundits aren't constantly making arguments to the American public through social media and media about the concept of criminal justice? Didn't we go through like 2 years of fucking riots over the concepts of criminal justice? Just because Mothers Against Drunk Driving do a fucking spreadsheet to try and hold judges accountable, which again is to Speakeasy's argument, which is that because they're elected in this potential, that special interest groups and lobbying organizations and and NGOs have the ability to make said people accountable, that juries aren't selected by aren't pressured with propaganda constantly.
Square this. So first you talk about holding judges accountable, but then you talk about
have you ever had to select for juries?
How does that square? If you're first on one hand and your first 4 minutes of your argument, you posited the fact that this whole concept about objective justice. Now you're talking about holding justice accountable. They should only, if I'm applying your logic, then they should only be upheld accountable.
Please don't do it.
Please don't do it. Please don't. Not the special interest.
Yeah,
so what
please
do you
don't
want?
do it.
In the words
please
of
don't do it.
DMX,
Please don't.
Yeah.
So please don't do an internal critique if you don't understand the logic of the other person's argument and you can't steelman it, right? So my argument isn't judges are these infallible creatures that bring about objective justice. My argument was that there is an objective fact, whether or not we fail to discover that fact or whether or not we fail to act upon that fact. There's an objective fact about whether or not someone stole something or didn't steal something, whether or not someone murdered someone or didn't murder someone. And my argument is that that judges in a panel or professional juries that are able to engage in critical thinking and probabilistic thinking in an area of expertise are more likely to ascertain that fact than juries that are far less likely to engage in critical thinking and are more likely to be swayed by emotion and rhetoric.
But juries aren't also always deciding just guilt or innocence. They're deciding grades
damages,
of a crime. No, damages or gradients of a crime. So like, yes, somebody died, but is it involuntary manslaughter or second-degree murder or,
That doesn't change the argument.
Most people don't even understand the difference.
Well, it does change the argument. It does change the argument because what you're saying is that it's up to these juries to decide if he died or he didn't, or they did it or they didn't, or they robbed or they didn't. And what I'm saying is the job of a jury is sometimes
I understand your contention.
Yeah, to figure out what should this.
It's also objective.
Let her finish.
Let her finish.
Mm-hmm.
The job of the jury is not just to decide did they do it or not, but to what degree did they do it? What's the charge? And that's why the jury instructions are so important at the end of the trial. And that's why a directed verdict is also important, because if the judge really feels like the jury missed it, they can overturn the verdict and call it their way.
Right. And
yeah, but that's not an argument against my claim. Hold on. That's not an argument against my claim, right? It is also objective whether or not someone had mens rea. Our ability to determine whether or not they had that guilty mind is something that we obviously can fail in because we don't have the ability to read minds, right? But it's also an objective fact. For example, when determining whether or not there's a gradient of the crime, whether or not they intended to do the crime, whether or not it was pre-planned, all of those things matter. What we're talking about is justice for the crime that someone committed. The idea that because the jury can decide to drop certain charges or not drop certain charges or do different gradients of the crime based upon how they feel, whether or not the person was culpable in that mind or whether or not they have that guilty mind or what those damages are doesn't change. It's not an argument against what I stated. It's just more rambling. It's just a distraction and subversion.
Oh, but I'm really enjoying myself. I'm glad I had a Red Bull.
I'm talking too much. Speak easy.
No.
You got to interrupt me. I'm sorry, brother.
I was like,
I'm being a dick of a partner.
Pretty awesome.
Fabian gets the monologue award for the evening.
You brought up a case earlier on. I made a note.
Brad Bully's a close second.
A case earlier where you talked about how the wise judiciary had to ensure that punitive damages were held to single-digit multipliers, right? And ultimately, I'm very familiar with that case because I used to argue that case when I was in law school a lot, right? And that, do you understand that it was the Supreme Court that said that the reason why we were going to hold punitive damages as single-digit multipliers was because essentially it constituted a taking, right? That these corporations, boo-hoo-hoo, should not have to walk into court and have their money taken away, right? But the sole reason behind why punitive damages were there because it was to punish and dissuade bad behavior. And the Supreme Court, of course, you don't have a jury. You have a panel of these so-called sage judges, right? That held these.
Are you ever going to argue my claims?
No,
what the fuck,
if you
dude?
allow me to finish, I can unfurl my argument. But alas, your exuberance is getting the better of you. My point is this, right?
Are you a lawyer, Broad Street Bully? I don't know yet. Are you a lawyer?
I am. And I'm gonna.
Okay, cool.
If you listen, I'm gonna tell you. And this is the reason why they call me
I
the
know.
Broad Street Bully, because I'm gonna stand on my box and bully with this one. That these judges, because they held punitive damages to single-digit multipliers, right? The punitive damages no longer became punitive, and it became a system of, you know what, we know that our damages are capped. The judges have allowed, because of their great decision making and objective justice, have essentially allowed these corporations to just write a check to be able to do whatever they want. That's yet another example of where these judges got it wrong at the highest level. But if you had allowed, like the earlier cases that occurred before that, we at the district level, in the appeals level, but at the district level, where the jurors said, no, we need to have punitive damages as a check, okay? Because it's in society's best interest. But these judges who make millions of dollars and are so removed from the plight of the average man, they decided to lift this checks and balances. That check and balance. That's why we need jurors there to decide cases that are in the best interest of the public, not the executory branches of government or judiciary.
That's a great speech on the pulpit, but again, you never got around to actually arguing against my argument.
My argument is that the fact that these judges, once again,
another speech,
these wise judges got it wrong, and the jurors had it right to act in the public's best interest, which is the reason at the bottom of the Broad Street Bully's name is.
Again, this is outliers.
Because it's
he's just not arguing the argument.
Outlier. It was part of his case in chief that he argued.
So is your argument, when you bring this up, is your argument that the system of having a judge is corrupt?
Again, the judiciary got it wrong.
And you call them outliers, but they actually, this is what moves the law, precedent.
Okay, so you're
case
saying
law moves
the
law.
system of having a judge is flawed? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that the judges get it wrong, and they need
I
people.
got you. Judges can be corrupt. Judges can be biased. I concede it all, my friend. Are you saying that judges having a system with a judge is flawed?
Yes, as well as having a system.
So we should have no judges? We should have no judges? Is that what you're saying now?
No, and again, just like having
okay, so we should have judges. Also, no, I don't want to hear your long stories. I've been listening to everybody's long stories tonight. My shit gets off in 30 seconds or less. Shut up for a minute and answer this directly, please.
Sure.
You want judges, yes or no?
Yes, just like I want jurors.
So judges aren't flawed. Got you.
Are flawed.
So all the flaws that the system of having judges isn't flawed.
Yes, the entire
okay. So just because people are biased?
Because the people are biased.
No.
And the system is driven by.
Got you. So the same thing. Same arguments you can give to jurors. All you're saying when you keep bringing up this shit about judges is arguments you can give to jurors. I and Fabian have presented to you arguments that you can't give to the judges, but it is the flaws of jurors. Can you please fucking address these without your fucking long stories or telling us that you're a lawyer?
I will address it by saying this. You made this objective. You make this
objection, Your Honor. Objection.
Objection.
No, you've made this
your question with a new story.
You made a one is better than the other argument. And I'm saying to you that they both get it wrong, which is the reason why we need the proverbial ram in the bush. You made this other argument that said that these 12 retards can't decide because of the complexity of law. But yet I presented on the other side where a complex issue such as punitive damages was decided wrong. And I would much rather have that ram in a bush than leave it to a panel of people that are so far flung removed from society.
Are punitive damages capped in certain cases?
I would much rather have
punitive damages capped in certain cases.
Yes.
Why?
In certain because it's state.
It's state regulated.
Okay, so it's just the state. So would you get rid of those state regulations and open up the jury, or do you think the jury might get it wrong?
For punitive damages?
Yeah, would you uncap all punitive damages?
You have to, punitive damages work to punish. You can't cap a punishment.
That's not an answer. Yes or no?
Because you know what? $100 will hurt.
Yes or no?
$1 million is not going to hurt Pfizer.
Yes or no?
So yes. No, you should not cap punitive damages. In the case law, which was based on, the takings clause was complete and absolute bullshit.
Okay, so what happens when Nationwide just like goes out of business because of like a fender bender, because someone gets injured in a fender bender, and a jury says, you know what, $10 billion. This person was a woman.
And a judge would direct that verdict. A judge would direct that verdict. It would never happen like that.
No,
okay. Oh, so hold on. So what you're saying is, hold on. I'm cooking. Shut up. I'm cooking. All right. So what you're saying is that there's a system in place for the judge to recognize that juries go too far because of their biases. Because of their biases, the judge has to step in and correct the mistakes of the jury, because the jury is a bunch of Walmart retards that are like Nationwide bad, therefore we'll give them all the money in the world. And a judge who actually has fucking critical thinking skills and reason and understands the law is like, no, you can't fucking do $10 billion because that'll put every business in America out.
It doesn't work like that. And even your argument about the insurer, they're only liable up to the policy. They can't essentially be bankrupt.
Okay, you know what? Hold on. It's fucking let's say it's James River and it's fucking excess and surplus insurance, right? So they have these huge fucking accounts, and it's Uber. Okay, so it's no longer a fucking individual driver. It's Uber and James River with like excess and surplus, right? So they have these huge contracts for those just in case moments where things exceed the damages of the policy of like Nationwide or Geico or, you know, like whatever other insurance company. Do we just take them for all the money that we can? Or do judges step in and go, yeah, that's too much fucking money?
But a jury wouldn't do that. It wouldn't even be part of the conversation in the trial. Like you're making these crazy latitudes and these like what ifs scenarios that just wouldn't happen.
Founded in the law.
The jury, why wouldn't the jury do it? The jury doesn't do it because the jury doesn't do it because the system is in place to stop the jury from doing it. If it was completely uncapped, if anybody could sue anybody up until into the ends of the earth, you would absolutely have insane judgments against people. I mean, granted, to be fair, that's happened with judges as well. But what I'm saying is that judges more often than not get it right for all of the reasons that I have listed. And again, I have not heard a counter argument to that.
You haven't heard a counter argument that you cared to listen to, but that's all right, though.
I've been listening and responding so much that Speakeasy hasn't had a chance to cook enough.
Oh,
like you are.
I love Speakeasy, so let me go ahead and cook.
They're opening it up to you, Speakeasy.
Oh, I mean, so there's some parts that obviously I'm sure you can tell that me and Fabian don't exactly agree on, but the core of the argument of abolishing the jury trial, I haven't heard like really strong arguments. And like I'll bring up when you bring up like you guys have spoke to our arguments, the cost, the time it takes, the interpretation of the law being hard. You guys are bringing up arguments to our side of abolishing it. Like if you see this as a positive and like for the people, I'm failing to like, you know, connect here with you.
Well, I think that's all you've heard, but okay.
Well, you could always repeat
that's
your
all you agree
arguments
with.
right now
That's
and
all
make
that
a good one.
resonates with you because of your bias. Fine.
Yeah,
To say
well,
we haven't
you
made
know,
any
wouldn't-
argument is insane.
even if this were true, wouldn't this speak to the stupidity of having jurors on a trial? Right? What you're saying
Even your
right
quips
now,
support us.
You're saying during this debate, I can't even comprehend you're so fucking complex, and like I can't even comprehend what you're actually saying.
That's not what I said. I just said you're only listening to what you agree with.
Exactly.
You're only
I'm
hearing
just
what you agree
cherry
with, which is
picking.
fine.
Right.
Which
So
is
do you
fine.
want
That's your
people like
prerogative.
me on a jury deciding
I
if
don't
someone
get-
should be convicted
with
or not?
11 other people who are going to hear arguments and see
You
evidence.
put me in a room with
et
those
cetera,
11
et cetera.
people, I
But not
promise
just
you they're
that,
going my way.
The lawyers get
Promise
to
you.
choose. You have a whole process called voir dire where you interview your
Mhm.
jurors and choose the ones that you want. And lawyers can knock jurors off and keep the ones they want.
Right.
And
So
on any given
they
day.
get to cherry pick them and
No, it's
pick
not
for
a
the
cherry
biases
pick.
they want. That's
It's a-
amazing.
It's a vetting
So another
process.
reason we should get rid of it.
I
Great.
mean, according
That's
to
amazing.
says you,
And
but
I
it's a
guess you
vetting
also never heard
process.
of forum shopping either.
Yeah, it's a
When we as
vetting
court- when
process
we as
to pick
judges
for
decide
biases.
when
That's
we
stupid.
file our cases to be able to pull a certain judge, right? So again, this goes back to my imperfect system argument.
Mhm.
It
I'm
has to
sure
do with
Curtis
that man in the
Flowers
bush.
loved that they were allowed to do that. You know, they were allowed to X all the black jurors out so that it was a bunch of white racist people convicting him. I bet you he's real happy that we had jury trials. You know, thank God.
Right. And I bet you Johnny Depp was real happy too when his lawyers chose a conservative district in Virginia to be able to decide his case, right? And why people
Bro,
picked
she's
the Democrats
literally on
for reasons.
tape,
and why
fucking
people
saying
picked
all the craziest shit. Wouldn't have mattered.
and why people
You're
pick
bringing up
certain forms for a
high-profile
reason.
cases. All the shit was put out before we even got this case. Let's talk about a high-profile case that's gonna come up, right? How in the world? Tell me how in the world we can find a jury for the Charlie Kirk assassination that doesn't think the kid's already guilty? Tell me how you find that.
Lori Chick, would you like to answer that, or do you want
I
me
just think there's a lot of, if you want to talk about the Kirk assassination, I think there's a lot of evidence out there that he's not guilty. So I don't know.
Oh, really?
I don't know. And I
that's
think
not what I see. I see everyone already convicting this kid, saying that he's guilty 100%. Matter of
obviously
fact, we had a
not
memorial
watching.
played in front of millions where everybody comes up and confirms he's the killer.
Yeah,
What are
well,
you
we're-
talking about? That whole
we're-
case is fucked.
we're not
I
watching
I-
the same
I-
news.
I would
Yeah,
even
we're not
say-
watching the same news.
I would be agreeable with Lawyer Chick on that because there's so many conspiracy theories
Yeah,
rattling
yeah,
around.
yeah.
and a
We
lot
are
of-
not watching the
There's
same
a lot
news.
of, from what
Nobody
I've
cares
seen,
about the crock pots.
there's a lot
Sarah,
of
are you
hesitation.
debating us? What's going on?
I'm just saying this is like a general open in terms of what everybody thinks about Tyler. Was it Tyler Robinson? I think.
Everyone thinks he's guilty. Everyone thinks
No,
that him
I don't
hopping
agree with
off,
that.
does
him
not
in the
agree with that
picture
at all.
up, going up the stairs. Everyone thinks it. What do you mean?
Where
Only
do you
people is, like,
mean?
crock pots on fucking X that you're seeing making up conspiracy theories. They also think he was an AI and was never really shot. That shit's gonna get blown out, no problem. Nobody cares about that stupid shit being said.
Well,
All the point
Lori
is
Chick.
he was killed and we got the guy. That's what everybody's saying. Even if
Not
you're
Lori
saying
Chick.
they'll say there was more people involved, blah, 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 blah. No one's saying they don't think he was on the roof and shot. No one's saying that. What are you
There's
talking
so
about?
much people are saying.
He's
I
going to
would-
get his
yeah, I
day
would
in
say-
court.
Lawyer Chick,
what
Lawyer
I-
Chick, Lawyer
He's
Chick. Let's
innocent,
assume,
so-
Sarah. Let me hop
yeah.
in.
Go ahead.
So let's assume there are a bunch of people, Lawyer Chick, right? That are. Let's assume the conspiracy theorists, Israel did it. Group of faction of people on Twitter is actually representative of the entire population.
I mean, I wouldn't
So,
call
hold on,
Candace
hold on,
Owens a faction
hold on,
of people
hold
on
on.
Twitter, but go on.
Hold on, right? What? She certainly has a faction on Twitter. She's got plenty of followers, right? Whatever. So let's assume. My question then, like, we can just reformulate it, Speakeasy. Like, it doesn't even need to be they all think he's guilty. Where are you going to find a jury that doesn't already have an opinion about the Charlie Kirk assassination?
I mean,
That's a
that's
very good
you.
question.
You Yeah, great question, but you question your jurors and you find.
Can you imagine the level of retard you would have to be like, who's Charlie
that
Kirk?
person? We'll wait till hopefully someone was born today. We'll wait 18 years.
Let me ask Bully this. Let me ask Bully this. Let me ask Bully to answer this question. Bully, don't you think, having been, and I don't do jury work, but don't you think there's enough reasonable people that would come in that jury room and actually be able to be reasonable in spite of whatever media and whatever biases they have?
I believe so. And the reason being is that one, because you have to look at the way in which the jury system works, right? All you need is one person who is not swayed by opinion to be able to come in and say, listen, this is not right. And in that instance,
just hook them up to the reminder and we'll find that out.
And in that case, you have a mistrial, right? In which that individual is not convicted.
We have to be of the 40% that don't automatically change their votes because of another dominant juror.
Hold on. The thing too is that this is the reason why you have things such as jury surveys, right? To be able to pull out people that have biases. It's the reason why you have Batson challenges, to be able to pull out people that may have those biases so that you find a better system, right? But also, what about a judge that also may have certain types of opinions about how that case should work? So, you know, at least at bare minimum, there are some procedural safeguards to be able to make sure you get a better jury. There's absolutely nothing you have in terms of choosing a judge and a prosecutor, because it's all about the luck of the
You're
draw.
arguing no. You're arguing. That's a logical fallacy.
Jury?
Hold on. That's a complete logical fallacy. Both Speakeasy and I have given multiple alternatives, and none of them have been abolish the jury and then just keep singular judges. Both of us have stated a panel of judges or a professional jury, right? Like, so you arguing against this null, right? Which is the jury is gone and then we just keep the singular judge is just completely fallacious.
Okay, so let's go through with the panel of judges argument, because again, I have a framework that shows how the criminal justice system and how the justice system actually works. So I know, as someone that
you're a lawyer, from experience. Make some fucking arguments, man.
I've listened to you multiple times, like actually explain things that with a certain degree of certainty that like it's not how it works. So I know in real life that if I go and I file a case during a certain time, I'm more likely to pull a certain judge. Okay. I also know that if I'm doing a federal case and I can find a sufficient nexus to a certain jurisdiction, I can pull the judges that are more favorable to my particular case.
Yeah, I know you wouldn't be able to do that.
Not arguing the point and can't name.
Right. Again, I'm talking about the panel of judges. I know that.
Yeah, but that's not how it would be.
But again, if you allow me,
nobody's arguing for that system.
I can also find, in terms of the panel of judges argument, that if on which in certain jurisdictions you would find a panel of judges would be generally at the appeals level. Where in DC you get 3, and I think Virginia you get 5. In other jurisdictions you get about 7.
We're not talking about appellate courts.
You're
just talking nonsense.
But hold on, I'm actually taking your panel of judges argument, and I'm saying that the fact that even then I can still manipulate the system by finding out judges who are at the end of the term and want to be receive an additional term. And I know, well, you know what? They may not want to come out with a controversial verdict here because they ultimately want to be reappointed. So again,
why have you baked in? No,
okay,
this is nonsense. You've baked into your example.
Hold up, Fabian. One second.
What I'm describing are things that commonly happen.
Broad Street.
It's not fantasy. It commonly happens.
Broad Street. You wouldn't be able to do that in the system where the judges are randomized. You wouldn't get to just select what judges you get. That's not how it would work, right? No, but you're arguing for a system that I nor Fabian have.
It's just a straw man.
Works. That's what I'm doing. Right now, I'm not living in Disneyland where every imagination and fantasy comes true. I'm talking about the system as it is right now and how the system is being manipulated and how these objective arbiters of truth that you posited in your first.
This is why people hate lawyers. This is why people hate lawyers. You're refusing to engage. You're
Nobody
refusing
said
to
this.
engage with the hypothetical and instead creating a straw man, then getting up on a big giving a big speech about it, and then you just claim over and over again that you've said a bunch of things that are completely false, and I know that that's not how the system works.
But
I tell you to name one, and you just keep giving your fucking speech.
Yeah, Broad Street. Let me demonstrate this for you really
one.
quickly again. Broad Street. Let me try to demonstrate this again for you very quickly. Do you think someone, because you said you went to school and you're a lawyer, right?
Law school license in 2 jurisdictions, currently working on the 3rd.
Base. Do you think you have a better understanding and can interpret the law with more fairness compared to Sarah?
No. And I'm going to tell you why.
You're a shit fucking lawyer. Then.
Nobody hire this guy ever. Ask for your fucking money back.
To be fair, though,
Holy
I did do free law.
Because again, I am so far removed.
Yeah, you took some English classes, Sarah. Calm down.
Because again, this is real stuff. I'm so far removed from being able to understand from the average everyday thing that I am that guy that would say, you know what, punitive damages in this case should be double-digit multipliers, because we actually need to punish, because I know because of my understanding of the law what needs to be done in order to affect real change and actually provide real justice, which is the
pause right there. You just gave an example based off of your education. I disagree with it, but based off of your education and understanding of the system, why you would change the damages because of the specific legal and political opinions that you bring because of your expertise of knowledge. Good night. It is over. Broad Street Bully is on our side now, and he's thinking in his brain to try and figure out his own fucking contradictions.
But I also said I was an administrative law judge, and that I also was held to bias, which is the reason why in a lot of my decisions, I wish I had a jury there to be able to decide what was reasonable in the best interest of society.
I just want to let everyone in the chat know that if you guys need a lawyer, you can hire me and Fabian. We will be costing $4,000.
I want to let everyone know that I have not passed the bar.
All right,
that I have not.
Fuck it, bro.
Nothing I give is legal advice.
Looks like we don't need you. We don't need you.
I went to school for psychology and counseling. All right, I'm not an expert.
I wanted to hand it over to Lawyer Chick. She's been kind of on the quiet side. I wanted to give her an opportunity, since we are tailing towards the end, to maybe if she had some additional arguments to throw in there.
No, I think everything that I needed to say has been said throughout this evening. I don't really have anything to add. I'll sit here for, happy to be here for the final debate and get in where I fit in. But I still think it would be, believe it or not, much less efficient and much less fair to abolish jury trials. I'm still as messy as I think they are, and expensive and flawed, I still think that they are a crucial part of our justice system as it stands. And unless we're going to undo all of it, I mean, a panel of judges or just arbitration.
Hell yeah.
Just gives me,
Chick, you're coming around. Let's undo all of it.
No, it gives me a
voluntary justice, baby.
That's a whole nother conversation. We're not. I mean, if we were going to abolish everything and redo everything, that's another conversation. But tonight we're just talking about jury trials. And I'm still for them. So thanks.
Anyone else want to dive in, or else we can move over to closing statements?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're pretty much cooked. I mean, I don't see them going anywhere except circling and trying to bring up some more like random rare cases where a judge was corrupt, right? But they've agreed, like especially Lawyer Chick. Like I'm surprised she's even on the side of having a jury trial. Only reason I can see it is because a lawyer will have an easier time giving rhetoric to a bunch of morons in a crowd than they would actually, giving
job
evidence
security
to a case.
Job security over here. That's what they're arguing for.
Fair enough. All right. Well, let's go ahead and move into closing statements, please. Lawyer Chick, if you want to kick us off with your final statement.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I don't think I'm cooked. I think I stand by my arguments. And these outliers that you talk about in these random cases, again, are actually what sets law. It's precedent. These cases don't come every day. They come every, 5, 10, 15, 20 years, depending on the case. So that's how American law is built, by what you call outliers, what we call precedent and case law. So with that being said, this has been fun. I totally disagree with whatever solution you bring up. Like I said, to a jury trial, panels of judges sounds extraordinarily expensive and administrative. The whole reason why juries exist is really to bring the law, I guess, to bring the law to the people and the people to the law. And in theory, I'm still, I guess, an idealist. That's still a super important part of this functioning system as we know it. Again, if we want to talk about what we could rebuild if we tore it all down, it's another conversation I'm happy to have. So thanks, everybody.
Perfect. Thank you. Broad Street Bully, to you, sir.
To echo everything Lori Chick said, but I'd encourage everyone to go out and read the book by one of my professors, Andrew Ferguson. It's called Why Jury Duty Matters. And I encourage everyone, please don't rip up that form. Go out and serve on a jury. We need you. Society needs you. Judges need you in order to become a more perfect union. Thank you.
Thank you. Fabian, to you, please.
Wait, how long are closing statements?
Typically, same in is same out.
I'll try and keep it brief because they were, short and sweet. So to be short and sweet, I posited the question in the beginning after making my arguments of all of the reasons why jurors are more susceptible to emotion, cognitive biases, why the research clearly shows that these people are more easily manipulated by rhetoric and by, poisoning the well and things of that nature, and why judges, in a panel or systems like they use in, like I said, in Israel or in France or in Germany, or in Italy as well, right? Why these systems, I think, tend to be more cost effective as well as get closer to the objective truth when it comes to crime. Obviously, I'm not a legal positivist, right? I absolutely support jury nullification, which is, why my intro statement, I talked about the founding fathers and what their actual arguments were, and why they believed that jury trials were a necessary, I think Patrick Henry called it a necessary appendage. Hamilton and Madison arguing that it was a bulwark against the state, and why I think that those systems, the very things that they highlighted that were flaws of jury trials are all things that have drastically exacerbated in our current society. The complexity of law, it was kind of like, to borrow a term from Broad Street Bully, poo-pooed away. Right. This concept of, the complexity of law. I think it is very obvious that law has grown in every domain ever so more complex, and that jury instructions, get longer and longer as the decades go by because the laws get more and more complicated. The regulations involved, especially when we're dealing with things like financial crimes or things of that nature. When we were talking about, things like such, just there's so many issues here. And so I pose the question, well, how is it that a jury trial is more likely, to preserve our liberties in some degree against judicial tyranny? And they, I think it was great of them to bring up that, yes, certain cases set precedent, they get challenged because of, certain violations, et cetera. But again, what we see over and over again is that all of their arguments entail to the counterfactual that we gave, right? The biases. Obviously, judges are biased. Obviously, jurors are biased. But again, we gave an argument as to why a panel of judges or systems like they use in Europe would be better, and they have no rebuttal for that specifically, other than bringing up cases that set precedent. Well, here's a funny thing. If there's a panel of judges, and this occurs in all of those other countries I mentioned as well, you still have an adversarial system. You can still challenge and bring to appellate courts. Nobody said we were going to abolish appellate courts. And then you can still set precedent in case law. So again, every argument that they gave tonight was an argument that also worked in our favor. And so it's almost like I don't know what to say as a closing statement other than repeating everything I said in the opening statement, because none of them were sufficiently challenged. And I need better opponents.
Thank you, Fabian. Speakeasy, to you, please.
All right. Well, first off, again, thank you to Sarah for hosting this. Thank you to the opponents for showing up, and as well as my partner. All right. Anyone who doesn't know me, I go by Speakeasy on YouTube. Normally a conservative commentator, debater, musician. I also run a Bloodsport debate panel every Friday with a cash prize on the line. So I know a thing or two about high stakes and tough decision, and that's exactly what we've been talking about here. Okay, the highest stakes there are human lives and justice. Look at what we've been defending here, right? 12 strangers randomly picked, holding the fate of someone's life in their hands, and they call it tradition. I call this chaos dressed up as fairness. It's biased, it's inconsistent, it's emotional, and it's slow. Again, it's an institutional bias running like a fault line. Okay, the wealthy, the educated, and all the dominant groups get overrepresented while the marginalized stay left behind. And you guys call this a democracy. Again, I call this lottery, where luck decides guilt or innocence. You may want to talk about a reform. You know, we heard little bits about it. Again, that would have just been putting lipstick on a corpse, and anything they brought up about maybe changing, it just sounded stupid. All right. Ask yourself before you leave this debate tonight, all right? Do you trust 12 random retards to decide the fate of human life, or do you trust justice itself? Trained, unflinching, and accountable justice, all right? The answer is clear. The jury's dead, and it's time to bury it. And one more thing. I know it gets contentious in these debates, all right? But I hold no hard feelings or hate towards the other side. All right. I still hope God brings you many blessings. Okay.
Likewise.
Now I feel like a dick because I didn't say that at the end of mine. You know what I mean?
Thank you, Speakeasy.
Fabian.
Thank you guys for having me too. By the way, I really enjoyed myself. This was
yes. I'm
I
so
was
glad.
bed by 2. I'm usually in bed by 7 o'clock, so it's pretty cool.
Wow. Welcome to the night crew and all of the night dwellers. I have officially dropped the link for Open Panel Dumpster Fire. If you'd like to start jumping backstage because you have something to add, or you just want to call them all a bunch of humbo jumbo tarts, that's fine too. It works just the same. It sounds about right for the par for the course. Otherwise, we're going to go through some super chats while you guys start moving and making your way backstage. Some dude says, just sat on a jury. The 11 others just wanted to go home ASAP. Not one understood the reason there were 3 charges. Same crime. Presumed innocent. 11 lied. Any thoughts you guys want to add to that?
Well, yeah, this is actually one of the things I've been speaking to the whole time, right? Is that you just have people that don't even want to be there, right? When we first fired this up, mad people in mine and Sarah's chat I seen said that they literally did whatever they could to get out of jury trial.
Same.
But then there's also the opposite people who like really, really, really want to be on the jury. They're like thirsty for it, and they're like, "I'm the perfect juror. I'll say
maybe for like a famous
say."
person.
I told you.
There's a celebrity. You're like, yeah, I want to be there.
Hold on. No, it's the boomers. No, listen. I ran I was the supervisor for the quality control supervisor for the census. God, I could tell you about that shit show. But like, dude, it was so difficult getting employees for the post enumeration survey, to go out and like, you know, and interview people like for their 3rd time for the census. People were very angry. But like, dude, it was literally just all boomers. And then it was me at like 28 and like a bunch of boomers. And it's like, and it's because everyone knows that there's no sense of civic engagement in Gen Z or millennials, and especially Gen X, right? Gen X are completely checked out. They've always been. I mean, they're coming back with Facebook memes and being like, the adults in the room, right? But there is no civic engagement. These people don't give a fuck because the state hasn't done anything for them except fuck them over, right? Like, and so like they're not interested. They don't care. So I mean, like, it may have been true in a bygone era, certainly when the founding fathers were arguing for this, but in today's era, nobody wants to be on fucking jury duty. It just fucks up your schedule and your day. And yeah, there's some people that care, but that's a fraction of a percent as far as I can tell. Maybe the lawyers will argue it's like 10% or something, and I'm in an echo chamber, but it's certainly not the majority.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever necessarily seen a whole lot of happy people, but the like the people that were the teacher's pet, they're the ones that get excited for it. I've noticed the like overachievers. James of the Big Ten says, "Thank you, Sarah. Lawyer Chick is a legend, just for subtitle."
Thank you, James.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but she won't hand out pamphlets. She
Maybe
knows
now
that'd be a mistake.
Maybe now I will.
Well, and actually, while you guys were going over that topic, I looked it up for that judges can choose whether they want to instruct the jury that that's even a possibility or not, which is a scary thought because it's like, well, so now you're subjective to whether the judge even wants to inform the jury, and what we inform the jury of is the most vital bits of information, like the law, how it's applied, the sentencing behind it, so on and so forth. And they're only allowed to work with what they've been given. So if we don't let them know and they didn't already know to begin with, well, where is that subjectivity there?
That was like the Florida case that I brought up, that like over 100 convictions had to be either overturned or reversed because of the faulty jury instruction, because it was something about what it was reliant on was wrong. They weren't supposed to put what it was relying on. I can get the exact details for you if you'd like, but yeah, that's the problem, is jury instructions in itself is an issue.
Right.
And that was what I brought up when I brought up Lysander Spooner's an essay on trial on jury trial, right? It's the same thing, that the state controls the process of instruction and controls the system. So it was always a contradiction in and of itself. This concept of like the trial by jury being a bulwark against it was only a temporary thing because of the contradictions inherent in state justice.
Fair enough. Anthony says only 1 out of 10 on the tomato tax. Pick up the slack, hit the like, and subscribe. Thank you for the kind reminder, Anthony. A nuke throws in the Big Ten to say entry ticket to the show. Yes, have you all paid for your ticket yet out there in the audience? The Carnal Conservative says, save me a slot. Well, panel is officially open, Carnal, so feel free to jump on in.
It feels like a contradiction, doesn't it? Carnal Conservative.
A little bit. Contemporary Compendium says, guess who single-handedly made the decisions to uphold the unconstitutional pokey thing in 19 orders in 2020 onwards? Judges, no jury, hell, even no trials. Any thought process there?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't think that judges don't make mistakes, right? I mean, I think we were talking about cases.
You're bringing up something like nobody's faced before. Like we can look at this afterhand and say, they all made bad decisions because I would have did this and I would have did that. But again, this is just like post making up what you think would have been done better, right? It's easy to say in a situation we've never seen before, we should have did it this way.
Well, no, I agree that the entire concept on I'm not pro statist, so it just doesn't deal with the argument of whether one is better or the other, right? Whether it is better that there is a jury trial, whether or not it's better that there is a panel of informed professional jurors or judges. Instead, it's like judges are bad and politicians are corrupt. It's like, yeah. Agreed. I'm with you, brother. Like, I'm with you. Politicians all suck. Everyone in the government sucks.
Listen, I think that the best and brightest minds in terms of judges on the Supreme Court currently, I don't know if there's an article, I think it was an NBC or someplace I read, where the federal district court judges are now pissed off at the Supreme Court because of the decisions that they've been making. I mean, the fact of the matter is, even this panel of judges are even getting it wrong, right? And that's why, again, we're always going to need that third party, I think, because even these judges just sometimes they can't even get a clue. And I mean, you did make some good points, about Gen Z being disaffected. I agree with you there that sometimes some of them don't make, they're not as engaged. But I've just seen where you find some people who really want people to get their day in court, that really take the evidence seriously. So I don't know. I've seen it on both sides.
Fair enough. James says, I'm surprised a libertarian is against jury trials. He trusts agents of the state, judges, versus the people. Key problem is the state does not fully inform the jury of their rights and duties.
Yeah, I mean, obviously this is directed towards me, so I'll just state that any system that does not allow for voluntary justice is a violation of human rights. It just is, obviously that's not like something I'm going to harp on big when my, when my co-partner isn't a libertarian. And so the question then becomes, if the state refuses to stop violating your rights and give up its monopoly on the justice system, then we need to move in such a direction that minimizes violations of the non-aggression principle to the greatest degree. And I would state that the altruism and collectivism and the horrendous philosophy of the typical juror is one that is less likely to engage in finding the correct and objective decision within the judicial process. So it's not so much that I want or like or trust the state in that regard. It's just that it's better than the jury trial system.
Yeah, you were being a good debate partner, first off, okay? And that's the actual point, though, is regardless of like the replacement and what we would do instead of the jury trial, like where we might disagree on, the main core, abolishing the jury trial, we had agreed on and we made solid arguments for. And so I don't see a problem that, he's libertarian. I
need to make it clear that like I'm not trusting agents of the states and judges, like versus the people. But I would suggest for like introductory libertarian reading, read Democracy, the God That Failed by Hans Hermann Hoppe and actually read it instead of pretending to read it. And you'll notice why Hoppe argues that monarchism and feudalism are superior systems to liberal democracy. But that doesn't mean that they're good systems, right? They're just better than liberal democracy.
Right. And I wish that people knew like how the criminal justice system works and how to because most of the cases I do are criminal cases. And I hate to tell you all, judges don't know the law. It is actually the lawyers' jobs through briefs, motions, arguments to educate the judges on what the law are. Even when you're certain like a lower court judge and even certain courts, they have something called a judge's bench guide that they use. And then if they have really complex cases, they have to go back to a bunch of law students and law clerks, right, who also help them understanding the law. So again, it's these guys, even the panel, right? They're swayed to argument and through lawyers, and they get emotional, and they need to be educated as well. So even the panel of judges argument is just not a straw argument, at least in practice. Right? And I think I
agree with you.
Practice I agree with you how this works.
I agree with you to a certain extent, and that's part of that's part of my argument, right? Which is that the law is ever increasingly complex to such a degree that even judges struggle to understand the law that they're judging on. And so the concept that it's therefore good that the jury be there really kind of just, I feel it goes more towards my argument than yours. If the law is becoming so complex that judges not only have to brush up on it, but have to re-educate themselves on all of the changes and things that are occurring. Yeah.
It's not necessarily even the complexity, it's the amount of it, right?
Well, I think that's kind of,
and that they get different cases in front of them on any given day.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm just pointing out that the fact that even they're swayed, right? I mean, I'm trying to remember, there was a Supreme Court case where and I can't believe I forgot the case citation, but like the briefs were like absolutely wonderful. Clarence Thomas didn't ask it, like as usual, didn't ask a single question. The lawyer just hopped up for like 35 minutes, talked about public policy, never touched on the law. But the brief was just so well written that it persuaded like half of the Supreme Court bench. So I don't know. It's slippery.
Well, I mean, to be fair, SCOTUS is choosing the cases that they take, right? So they have a vested interest in researching it before the case is even there. It's not like it's a mystery, right?
Yeah.
Evan Lord comes in with a big 10 to say, Speakeasy is giving me black fatigue. Thank you, Miss Sarah, for hosting a debate and open panel today. Anyway, chat and panelists, what is your favorite Game of Thrones noble house for the tomato tax? Anyone a Game of Thrones watcher?
I have no idea.
Sorry,
like
Evan. No
I don't
nerds
like
on
to
board
I
know.
watched
tonight.
through it, but I don't remember the names. Of
I like the Iron Bank. That's the
houses.
only ones I like. The Iron Bank.
Oh, I'm going to convert two capitalists here tonight. All right.
Some dude says my case of 11 people not caring about lying about innocent until proven cannot be rare. Reasonable person is academic nonsense. Retard is right. Any thoughts?
Based.
I don't. I might disagree that like reasonable person is academic nonsense, but I think there's a this is one of those problems where I think there's a legal understanding of reasonable and then there is a colloquial understanding of reasonable, right? And so I think this is actually one of those cases where jurors are such a problem because they come in with a concept of what is or isn't reasonable, which is like, would I do that? Does that seem like a good idea? As opposed to a recognition that there is a line that is intersubjectively communicated within culture and society where actions or are telegraphed or behavior is telegraphed in such a degree where like there is a threshold where you are crossing into reasonable and unreasonable, and that's going to be different based upon like obviously the case and what that standard is applied to. So I don't think it's necessarily academic nonsense. I just think it's something that is difficult for a jury to understand.
That's fair. That's fair. James says if people are too dumb to serve on juries, are they smart enough to rule themselves? If they can't rule themselves, don't we need an all-powerful state and professional managerial class to rule them?
Of course they can't rule themselves. What do you mean? Like we wouldn't need laws if people could just all rule themselves. What kind of stupid fucking question is that? Like
It's probably directed
people
to me.
are
Yeah,
people
I was
of
gonna
course
say, I
are
think
too
that's
dumb to
directed at
rule
you.
themselves.
Well, I think what you actually advocate for when you say rule yourselves, right? It's kind of interesting because they use like a semantic argument here. Because I would argue that if you're a statist, you're actually the one in favor of people ruling all elements of society, right? You're the one that thinks that some 18-year-old fucking, fresh out of their parents, still living in their parents' basement, person has this same voting power as like on CDC policy as like an epidemiologist, and I think that's fucking retarded, right? So like I think actually the concept of self-rule and self-ownership from a libertarian perspective is, it comes with it a certain understanding of voluntary hierarchy, and that hierarchy is established as expertise, and experts do the things that they're experts in, as opposed to this stupid system where like 330 million Americans get to decide what the policy is for fucking Alaskans. Like, why? How does that make sense other than the status quo?
Lawyer Chick sends in $5 because I'm awesome and I have the chat that always wins every time, no matter who's debating, what they're debating, or why they're debating it. Chat always wins. Texas Bully Moms with the Big 10 says, excuse me, it's we the retards. We've surpassed we the people. Fair enough. P. Fledge sends in 5 to say, remember to tip your hostess for this non-habit forming sleep aid. Yes, you are all addicted to this show. Atima, who is backstage as well, sends in 10 to say, are all legal cases the same? If not, why would we try to create a universal system for legal cases?
I don't think anyone argued that.
I think she means
No, we just want the law to be applied universally. I don't care if you're, a single mother or some, rich dude. Like if you stole something, you should get the right punishment. If you fucking murder someone, you should get the right punishment. It shouldn't be about your background and all this emotional bullshit. That's what I'm talking about.
But I think what she's talking about is this idea of like a panel of judges or arbitrators. I think she's arguing that juries. Yeah, the juries are more.
Why does it need to be 12 jurors every time? You know what I mean? Like,
well, sometimes there's you could have
argument.
5 or 7 or 9 or 12. It's not always a 12-person jury.
But again, you could have 3 or 4. Actually, as a matter of fact, Speakeasy, I don't know why you didn't bring this up again. You specifically stated that depending upon the complexity or the type of case would depend upon how many individual judges you would have on. Right. So he's actually explicitly argued against that. So I don't know who this is directed towards.
King Speech sends in 20 to ask, did we hit the goal? No, not yet, but when you sent that final 10, you did. Thank you so kindly. Broad Street, I know you were debating the idea of making an early exit this evening. Do you want to stay on for a little bit of open panel, or would you like to go ahead and leave before we get?
I'll hang on for a little bit. This is pretty
Ooh,
awesome.
I have a feeling Broad Street Bully is going to be coming back for more debates. See, it is addicting. All right, let's get us set up and get ready to meet your panel. Hang tight.
It's away. Oh.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, the gauntlet is officially open. I will start shifting the chat over to there shortly with a link to get you, over to the gauntlet side. The tomato side will be shutting down shortly over on the YouTube. So be prepared for that. And if you can either catch the link or catch the raid, a choice is yours. Outside of that, the 4 panelists on the top of the screen with me are protected for the evening. You cannot boot them. However, anyone on the bottom half is bootable. Backstage, I currently have Powder Dusty, Reverend Russ, Mo Rebuttal, and somebody just jumped in. That's Beats by T9P. All right, so I'll continue letting the chat know who's backstage. So if you want to boot someone and bring someone else up, it's a measly $10 out of your pocket and into mine, and I will happily make it happen. All right, Evan, you were first in line per usual, quite frankly. Why don't you go ahead and kick us off with some thought process there?
If you have anything for me, I'm gonna be right back. I really gotta piss. I've been holding it in for like last 15 minutes, right?
Do you need a hand with that? I'm sure someone will walk you to the bathroom.
Shake it more than 3 times. You're playing with it.
I need 2 or 3.
A Broad Street Bully. I just would like to say I really appreciate your eloquence this evening when you were talking and using very descriptive language. I very much appreciate that. Though, Flavian Liberty, when it comes to the abolishment of trials, wouldn't you say that it's like the trial or like the jury system is better because it is more inclined to have an innocent person stay innocent as opposed to the state just going in, forcing you with either a plea bargain, which is complete bullshit, or like it will strong arm you otherwise. And the jury is the one thing that stops like plea bargains from being outrageous.
I mean, I don't think so. And the reason I don't think so is because we're kind of already in a situation where 97% of criminal cases are plead out anyways. Right. So, I mean, like, if the concept is that like this system will exacerbate that, it's like, I have a hard time imagining it being that much worse, and to what degree it would even be relatively worse, right? Like even if it was even if it was like another 2% of cases, which would be horrible, right? Like relatively speaking, 97% are already, no longer go to jury trial anyways because the state knows that you can either take a plea deal or they're going to charge you with additional crimes if you exercise your presumed right to trial by jury. So I don't see evidence to see that, but I mean, like, that doesn't mean that wouldn't occur, or that wouldn't be an increased problem, right? Like, anytime I am dealing with pragmatic concerns of the state that isn't full abolishment, I would always say, like, phase these things out, right? Like, potentially, like, let a municipality or something try it out, and if it's disastrous, then, whatever. I mean, as much as I dislike the state and many in the Constitution and many of our forms of government, that doesn't mean that like federalism was a terrible idea, right? Like let's see Florida fucking try it And if it works out great in Florida, then maybe more states will, would have the freedom to adopt it. Obviously, this is all kind of moot because it requires a constitutional convention to occur anyways, right? So this entire thought process is hypothetical. It's just as likely as abolishing the state as far as I'm concerned.
And allow me to interrupt. Cash App just came in for a measly $10 from Flo to boot Atima and get himself up here. Powder Dusty always likes to use the power of money to get himself on screen because he always ends up late in the game, which I'm gladly appreciative because
I'm also going to take a quick piss.
My money power is better than my time management power.
Fair enough. And if you have not already moved over to the Gauntlet, please continue to do so now. I will be shutting down the tomato side in exactly 2 minutes. So if you're watching on the tomato side, start moving over or catch the wave in 2 minutes when I shut it down. Okay. Evan, if you wanted to go kick back, or if not, we can hand it off to someone else.
All right. I'll go in the back, though. There's just one thing I want to say to Speakeasy when he comes back, but that may take
that super chat with the black fatigue made me LOL for real.
There's a lot of lore built into that one. All right. Hang tight, Evan. Effigy, next in line.
I'm back.
Does anybody disagree?
I heard him say he had something for me, and I rushed back. Didn't even wash my hands just for you, bro.
All right.
Nasty.
I'd just like to quote from one of my favorite shows. I'm going to go and say something that may hurt you on a deep personal level, but it's the truth. Speakeasy, you're not black. You're white. But anyway, have a good night.
That was a good one, bro.
Bye, Evan.
Good one, bro.
Wow. All right, Effigy, kick us off.
You waited all that time just to say that? What a fucking dork.
Yeah, first I would like to...
after he says it.
First, I'd like to congratulate Fabian on his transformation from anarcho-capitalist to statist bootlicker.
Right.
All in one night. Since the last time I was on panel with him, he was literally arguing against all this shit, talking about private.
We strategized ahead of time, Effigy. Stop holding this shit against him. He was making sure he didn't go against me during this debate, okay? We obviously disagree on a whole bunch of shit, right?
Sure, it just seems like, especially during the debate, him like saying he's an anarcho-capitalist and then going down these lines of argument just seemed completely antithetical to what he's saying. So I'm not sure how much he actually... Well, isn't the entire point of anarcho-capitalism not to have a state arbiter for all this? Wouldn't you prefer to have private arbitration for all of that?
Yeah, I've mentioned that multiple times.
It's expensive as fuck.
Yeah, also...
Yeah, but he's comparing the two.
ECP.
He's comparing juries to a panel of judges, right? He's comparing...
Also, maybe you missed it.
He says they both suck.
I may have missed it.
Maybe you missed it, right? I
catch most of the debate, but not all of it.
I specifically stated
idea
multiple times against that.
Okay,
what I said multiple times. Okay,
yeah, that's the third time you said it.
I get it. Yeah. So, you're coming in a line of attack against my character. And
oh no, it's still hilarious.
Channel,
it's hilarious that you've been status bootlicking all night. But my big gripe with y'all's position is
that you're just going to keep throwing
down Effigy.
You guys keep bringing up the idea of having a panel of judges. Do you think it's actually practical to have an entire panel of judges for every single trial in America?
Every single trial we're replacing jury
we have that many judges.
I'm just curious. Are you always interrupting in line? Animated. Are you always interrupting?
I asked a question. I don't care what you're saying right now. I asked a question.
Right, you asked a question and then you immediately steamrolled over the answer.
Let me give a little reset, everyone. I'm shutting down the tomato side. Move over to the Gauntlet as of now.